Thank you, George. Maureen, can I get a roll call?
Bonnie Franson will be Jeff Manson,
Present?
Pat Shea,
Here.
Nick Napoli is out, Dylan Penn,
Here.
Luis Rivera.
Here.
He'll be sitting in for Nick Napoli this evening, and Robert Garstack is not here.
Before we get started, I'm just going to point out the fire exits. 2 doors to the back, the one we came in, one on the other side. Main entrance to the building, back behind me here. There's another exit through these doors and to the left, and out through there and through the kitchen. If I can ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Thank you. Our first project for tonight is Henry Farm. Evening, Jay.
Monroe, Bluestein, Shapiro, Frank, and Barone, the attorney for the applicant. And I believe the last thing to happen was my... How am I doing? Better? Okay.
Thank you.
So what I hope is, I think are the last revisions to the scoping letter, so I'm hoping we can get this approved. There were only basically 2 substantive changes. They were in 3 places. And if I'm not mistaken, I think you had proposed, or that was in Ashley's prior letter, was incorporated. You want me to go through the changes?
Please.
Page 2, there was a bullet point towards the bottom of the page which says that may reduce impacts. We struck that, and I believe this was discussed at the last board meeting based on the stipulation we signed with the town board that the layout was the layout. And I thought that was, I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I believe that was discussed. So that was stricken. The same comment on the next page was also stricken as to revising the layout that was agreed to in the stipulation with the town board. And then on the 4th page, the bog turtle study was mentioned twice. I struck it out in B because it's my understanding that whatever we have to do with the DEC, there would be a recommendation based on that work or the Army Corps that as to whether or not we had to do an updated bog turtle study. And that was it. Everything else was identical. Everything else, all the other changes were accepted.
One question there is, going back to, I guess, the top of page 3, where you had modified that last bullet point a little bit, where it says, with your changes, it says final approval subject to obtaining a sidewalk waiver from the town board and subject to previously granted waivers for layout and design.
That's correct.
What
I
waivers-
apologize for that. That was from Vince Peters Act told me there had been prior waivers granted by, I believe, the planning board.
I think I'm aware of there was, I believe, the highway superintendent for the road grade or something. And geometry, but
On me, listen, if you got, I don't know exactly what they were, but I believe there were waivers. If we can, Sean, do you know what they were? We can spell them out if you want.
Sure,
That's not a problem.
I have a copy of those that I can dig out, so
Okay.
we can specifically reference those.
Okay, I have no problem with that. Thanks for catching that.
Okay, so Ashley, if we can start with you, I'd like you to give us an overview of where we're at with the process based on these revisions or what further discussion we might need to have around those.
Sure. So you had circulated your last round of comments after the last meeting, then you received these additional proposed changes from the applicant for your review tonight, and where you are is you have until June 20th to email your final version of, or for me to email the planning board's final version of what the scope of review is going to be required by the board. And that's pursuant to that stipulation. So I don't know if you want to run through these changes that were suggested or proposed by the applicant, and it might make sense to start at the end there. I think the most straightforward one was the bog turtle study, so I didn't realize that that was in there twice, so it's, I think, captured by that second bullet point. It says updated habitat species analysis, including but not limited to bog turtles and any species that are identified during the consultation process. So, covered already. Other item we talked about where Sean said he'd be able to get the waiver. So I think the requested waivers for 2% grade within 100 feet of any intersection and a minimum vertical curve length of 250 feet. So I think that waiver could be specifically identified in that last bullet at the top of page 3, and I think that was also identified earlier.
You email me that tomorrow, and I'll update the draft?
Absolutely.
That was the only way.
Oh, the specific, all I know is that Vince, I'll confirm it with Vince, whatever Sean tells me, but was there more than one?
That was the only one I recall.
Okay, all right. I'll confirm it with Vince, and then we can just add that, the language that Sean gives me.
Other item was the board's request that the applicant consider other lot locations. So I know we've been back and forth about this a little bit. The applicant had set forth their position as to why they were not interested in doing so. So again, this is the planning board's scope of review, something that you were asking them to consider as they continue the process. So their response can simply be, this is why we're not going to consider it, but by including it in your letter, it wasn't, I think, meant to, or not able to be a firm, change the location or anything like that. So I don't know what the board's thoughts are on that.
I know that was quite a bit of the discussion the last time that we met, and it still comes down to the issue of how the stipulation reads, as I understand it, that either the layout is effectively approved by the stipulation and that changes don't need to be considered by the applicant, or we do have that flexibility to ask for that. What's your take on that?
The stipulation does refer to that plan, but as far as, approval, that's, of course, within this board's jurisdiction as subdivision review. So you haven't really delved into reviewing the technical, the plan, the engineering review of the plan or not, and whether something might come up during that phase of that might require some kind of modification. That's yet to be seen. You had talked about this from the beginning. There initially wasn't any pushback from the applicant. They seemed amenable to not anything.
No, we were never looking at any significant changes, but we did talk about the possibility of some small revisions, and I'm of the opinion that that ought to still be in the scope. I'm wondering how the rest of the board, well, Jay, go ahead.
Well, listen, I can give you, I've been involved in this lawsuit for nearly 4 years, and I can tell you a little bit about how the settlement came about.
Please.
We proposed this 70-lot layout to the town board. Everybody sat on it for a long time in order to look at it. We did a cost analysis to make sure that we could swallow losing 45 lots, which was a big hit to take. At the end of the day, both sides wanted some certainty as to what was going to happen when we came back to you. And by using the existing layout without making changes to the road pattern, without making changes to as many lots as we could avoid, we knew all of this stuff had already been approved. It had been examined. Seeker had been done. It was an exhaustive process, and the fewer changes we made, the less likely we're going to run into anything new when this thing was done. Now, listen, it says right in the stip that your jurisdiction is not compromised by this stipulation. You still have to approve what we're presenting to you. We were very confident that by simply eliminating the lots and leaving the road layout and basically the lot layout as they were, we were relatively certain that we were in a good position to get an approval relatively quickly because this thing had already been approved. All we were doing was reducing the scope, which is always a good thing. So, and on the other hand, the town wanted the same certainty. They wanted to know that based on this stipulation, we weren't going to come in and say, hey, guess what, guys? Can we squeeze an extra 5 lots in here? No, it's a stipulation. It's agreed to. This is what the court said. This is what the judge said. We attached the plan. So both sides wanted some certainty here. Listen, in the course of doing this project, if you want to make a recommendation to it, we'll listen to the recommendation. But in terms of the layout and in terms of the basics as to what's shown on that, we have to stick to that because, you know, we're not, this project also became the margin on this project is now very thin. So, and we quite frankly run the risk of asking you to modify this. Let's say that we said, you know, we could squeeze 2 more lots in here. Will you give it to us? We run the risk that that's in violation of the STIP. We may get thrown in. We can't do that. So we're bound just like we're asking you to be bound. We just want, I mean, I can't tell you how much time went into this, how much time, and I can't tell you how much, I can tell you that there was a ton of time that the town took to review that layout. And finally, everybody came to the conclusion that we could put off this trial that was supposed to start the next day, and we could come in and we would live with it, the town would live with it. So that's why we're asking, please, we're saying we really can't agree to anything major. Now listen, if you come back and you say, you know, something minor where we're not adding lots, we're not changing lots, we're not adverse to listening, we're not adverse to making it a better plan. But as terms of the basics and in terms of this scope, the 70-lot layout that we provided you has to be the layout that we're going to go forward with.
No one was questioning the number of units at all, the 70 lot, and that wasn't it's not what's stated here, or not the intent at all. It was, I'll just read it, it was to consider revised lot locations that may reduce impacts to wetlands and or the grading of steep slopes. So whether there's, you know, shifts in the lot line or the home locations, things that can be done to mitigate those, and it sounds like you're
can always
saying
make those
that
recommendations if they make sense. The thing that triggered this thing really was moving the 4 lots up off the cul-de-sac of, I can't remember what it was. That was a major design, thing, and that's the thing we cannot do.
Okay, and
Now, listen,
that wasn't, it wasn't, yeah, I think that happened early on in your discussions, that was discussed, but that wasn't part of ever this comment letter or the scope or, it was a more general, consider what you can do to mitigate these
If,
impacts, so.
listen, if the
sounds like
if the
that-
bullet point here is simply to say you're free to make comments, that's implicit. You always can make comments to us. We can always consider comments to whatever. But at the end of the day, if we don't agree and we're simply asking that the board consider what was approved in the STIP, I think we just want to make sure we can get a decision on that. But we're not adverse to listen, is every plan absolutely 100% perfect? No. You can always tweak it. A tweak we'll listen to. But it was the major change where we're moving lots. That was a big deal. And that's something we can't consider something like that.
Well, that was kicked around in conversation. That wasn't, I certainly don't think that was the biggest concern of this board, and it was just something that was an idea that was toyed with. I think and what maybe you can give us some insight because you have been involved in the project for so long. I know you're not an engineer, you're the attorney, but one of the things that when we were looking at the layout that we have is the impact on a few of the lots on wetlands and how significant that was. And we were trying to look at options around that.
I'm not saying they weren't good, the comments weren't in good faith. I'm just saying it went far beyond what we thought we could handle. And so, and those lots were previously approved with those wetland delineations. Now, listen, we do have to do a new wetlands delineation. Let's say that the boundaries change. Hey, guess what?
Right.
We're going to have a talk.
That's understood.
Right.
My question is this. So compared to the original plan, before all of these lots were removed, what do you feel like, how significant do you think has been the reduction on impact on wetlands by removing those lots as part of what you got to with this stipulation? Was there any significance to that?
I couldn't comment because the lots you guys pointed out to me, it looked like there was no change. So it's not like we actually improved a condition that you might have a concern with. But I mean, generally, let's face it, we eliminated 45 units, we eliminated a cul-de-sac, and we're going to reduce the size of the water tower, we're going to reduce lines that are going to have to be run. Those are the kinds of impacts that we think we reduce.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I can just check in with the board on how they feel about that after we've heard Ashley's and Jay's comments. Pat, can I start with you on this?
Sure. I really don't have any comments. I remember on the last session that we had here, there was some back and forth, and I think the attorney or counsel has just reiterated what the objection was. Major changes are going to make this untenable for the applicant. So I think Bonnie had the most, and I don't have the minutes, but I think Bonnie had the most input on the changes requested, but I can't remember specifically what those were. I think it was just, do you, Sean?
I think they generally revolved around the grading, the amount of grading as well as the impact to the wetlands, as Jeff had stated. So, if I recall, it was more or less to slide the lots along the proposed roadways, not to change the design of the roadways. So,
I have to wonder, and maybe you've looked into this, counsel, with that Supreme Court case on wetlands, or what bodies of water can be controlled by the federal government, the Corps engineer. What's the status there? Nobody knows, right? No. Okay.
That case had to do with the jurisdiction and actions of the EPA. And I generally, when you have those cases, there's, to get to where their application is going to be on every single place, I don't know how it would trickle down, but I think our wetlands experts are going to have to become experts on that pretty quickly. And Sean's going to probably take a stab at it, and I'm sure Vince is. So I don't know how that thing works. They really lessened their. My understanding is the decision lessened the ability of the EPA to control wetlands. I don't know to what circumstances it applied. Didn't make any sense to me, but.
My understanding is that if the body of water.
Oh, it's adjacent.
Yeah,
It's adjacent, and I don't think that applies to us.
yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
it's whether two bodies are considered adjacent. It was very technical.
It's probably not going to affect
No,
the
it's not gonna
situation
affect
anyway.
us.
So I don't have anything.
Thank you. Dylan?
No comment.
Lou? So the operative question is, are we comfortable with the changes being proposed by the applicant in the scope? Because by the 20th, we need to have this done, and our next meeting is the 20th, if I remember correctly. So we need to make a decision tonight. Are we comfortable striking that language from the scope?
And also, just to comment on that, so although this has been called the scoping document or the scope, it's not a true, you would think seeker scope for a DEIS, that's something different. This particular comment was listed in the planning board's initial comments on the plan. So just like you, on any application, have your comments, then the applicant responds to them, when you're actually in the substantive review portion, which you're not there yet. So I think with the understanding that how you discussed it tonight, I think there's no reason why you can't insert that back in if that's what the board wishes to do. I think the piece where there's the actual scope of review was more the scope of what's required for seeker to evaluate the consistency with the planning board's prior seeker determination. So I think there's no issues on the same page there. Other item fell under one of your initial comments, which is something that also had to be given per the STIP.
I will state, and I'm willing to state this for the record, that if by striking the language regarding modifying the layout, the applicant does not read that to say that you're forbidden from making proposed recommendations for modifying. You can do it any time you want. It's just whether we're not reading that to say that we're not going to consider minor changes to the plan. That makes sense. We're not reading it that way. And I will tell you, it was the initial change to move those 4 lots up top. That was the trigger. It had nothing to, if that hadn't come up, we wouldn't be having this discussion, because we have no problem with you making recommendations for minor changes to this plan if they make sense for everybody. But they have to be in the context of this overall plan that the court ordered that we follow. So I can say for the record that we're not adverse to hearing minor modifications, whether that language is in there or not.
And I think I'm confident in saying that based on our discussions so far on this project, we're comfortable, as far as what the lot count is, the road layout, the overall, the overall subdivision plan. But yes, we're always going to look to perfect. And as long as that's.
We're not adverse to that.
As long as the applicant's on the same page as that, I'm comfortable with that. And I'm going to recommend, I'd like to, make a motion that Ashley prepare a final document that includes those changes, but, after her review, just to make sure that everything is included, so that we can present to our applicant by the deadline of June 20th.
I'll add the specific items that Sean's going to send to me.
Including those specific call-outs to the waivers that were granted by the Highway Department.
It would be to accept those changes with that one addition to clarify the waivers?
Correct. Have a second?
Second.
Oh, that was Lou. Right. Did you say second?
That was me.
Oh,
I
I'm
second.
sorry.
Now you can
I heard them both at the same time,
Yeah,
so
okay.
your call.
Okay. Jeff Manson,
Aye.
Pat Shea,
Aye.
Dylan Penn.
Aye.
Thank you.
Anything else we can take care of for you tonight, Jay?
Very thankful. We can now go to work,
Right.
and we'll be presenting as soon as we can, and we look forward to working with you on this thing, not against you, with you. So thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Jay.
Okay, take care. Sean.
Okay, moving along, our next application is Summercrest LLC.
Evening.
My name is Tim Mitz. Sitting behind me is Pamela Lee. She's the principal of Summercrest and operating manager. She's the controlling interest in it. So everything that we do is done between her and I. I don't know if some of you know who I am a little more extensively. We own Rest Haven, known as also the Helen Keller House up on High Street. And you know our success on that property. And we want to continue it on this property. And we want to keep it simple. We're actually doing this project in several phases. The more important phase here with this project, if you look at it, the buildings, they're in serious condition. These camps, just like Camp Monroe and other camps around the community, was what built Monroe. It's why people came here. I know of several people I've met around Summercrest on Pinecrest Bungalow Colony, where they actually came here in the summer and wound up buying a house right around the corner from the property. And they've come to me and sat with me, and a lot of the former guests are even planning on, or they used to be there, are planning on coming this summer to take a visit. We have acquired control of the 20 acres. We bought both the Belmonte property, which is 3-3-15.2, which has a barn on it that dates back about the 1900s. We just hired an engineer at the request of the building department, and that'll be going to the building department soon to repair that building. It can be repaired. It's just got two areas that need to be reinforced. We intend, and I give this board my utmost reputation and word, we intend on leaving the property the way it is. All we're doing is taking the existing buildings within the footprints of those buildings and reconditioning them, restoring them to what they are. I provided in the application some examples. If you look at what we did at Rest Haven, and it's all over the internet, you'll see that we stick to the rules. Rest Haven has been talked about over 36 times, articles on it. It's published in a book as one of the Hudson Valley's greatest hidden treasures. We're going to stick with that. I opt at the time we purchased the property, we were trying to figure the best way to utilize it. The property consists of 20 acres, including the Belmonte property, which eliminates any right-of-way issues. The property consists of 20 buildings, in-ground pool, the original 3,000 square foot recreation hall that has been pretty much restored other than windows and doors at this point, new roof on it, and a 2-acre lake that sits purely on this property. With the same concern as this board would have, as one of the maps that was given to you, we have employed professionals to give us information that would be relevant to this board potentially and have answers for you sooner than later. One of them is the wetlands. You have a marking from a gentleman named by Peter Torgerson. He's from Pearl River. My understanding, he's prepared, he's been before you guys before and stuff. He marked out all the wetlands for us. The map indicates his handwritten notes as to where the wetlands are. All the buildings are up 100 feet plus from the wetlands. But as we intended, and as I said, we are not touching the wetlands. We are not touching the environment, the trees. There were some trees that had to be removed only because they were on a building. Couldn't rebuild a building unless I wanted a tree in a tree house. So we did that at the direction of the building department. Orange and Rockland complained about the property and its electrical service, which has always been through the woods coming up between, if you're looking at the property on the left side, through the woods. They have already, and we're at the probably 40% completion, 60% completion. Currently, all the above wires, electrical, cable are underground. One area was already finished under the supervision of Orange and Rockland. They are eliminating all transformers out of the wood area. So we're not running through woods anymore. This has already been done. The transformers 2 and 3 have a ditch to it. We got to bring a machine in to get rid of some granite ledger, but that's about it, per Orange and Rockland, because they're in control of the project, not us. And we will then be laying the additional wires underground. Only those buildings, those units, there's 4 buildings with 5 rentals, only those buildings are the ones that are being put and electrified immediately to take everything down off of the property. And that should be done within the next 30 to 45 days. So we will no longer have anything. Optimum has come in and donated all the services, the wiring and everything. They have it up at what they call the riser, which is the last pole at the top of the road, where it splits. You have a stone, I don't know if anyone's ever been on the property, but you have a stone house right in front of you and it splits. That's where their riser is. Orange and Rockland has done inspections already on phase 1 of the underground. Everything was completed with no problem. To better formulate the property too, we also have Orange and Rockland is any day now starting, and they are bringing gas line up to the property, eliminating any propane, any oil, any other type of utility service other than natural gas on the property. Each of the units have already had that have been completed. The 5 have been installed with new units for the heating and stuff. So everything is converted immediately over from propane to natural gas without any wasting of time. We're doing this project in 3 different phases, and I know it's kind of sound odd for something like this, but you need to know what you're working with first before you can figure out where you're going to be on the end. We love the project. We own the property next to it, known as 127 Lakes Road. That property has 1 acre behind the other with a house in the front. I think that house has been there since the 1900s as well. And we're currently working on renovating that as well. And there's a building permit before the town, but it's not part of the historical designation as far as the camp goes. The camp was for Germans, is what it was since 1969. The Runkos owned it. They own what was known as the Parkside, or we may know it as Trey Angelina's now, which just recently closed on 17M. The idea is to keep this thing the way it is. And phase 1 is merely, and this is where we need your board's help because of the historical status, is merely to fix the outside of the buildings up, put new roofs on them, and that's it. So we secure the buildings because it's something that for years the former owners had leaks in the roof and didn't bother fixing a roof. If they had fixed the roof, these buildings would not be in the condition they are today. I truly believe, except for 1 building, every building on that property can be rehabilitated, and whether it ends up as another summer cottage or year-round units is to be determined in the 3rd phase of everything, because I cannot come to you and say to you, hey, it's a summer, But I don't know what the buildings are going to be like when we get done. And that's something I have to speak over with the building department too, and see what the rule, if the buildings can even make the rules for year-round, or if they have to stay seasonal. But that's not the important thing today. The important thing today is to ask this board to return this file back to the building department, who, Ben will tell you, I've owned property up here. Pam and I have owned property on Sergio Lane, which is right next to the Country Deli. It's a bunch of bungalows. We've owned it since '03. We don't have problems. Ben will tell you, I react to issues when they need to be reacted to. I have a good clientele, good tenants, property's well maintained. This one's a little nicer because you're so far back in the woods, nobody can see you. But I like it. It's enjoyable. And Monroe needs, the more important thing, Monroe needs these rentals. I don't care if you call them seasonal, if you call them year-round, we need them. And why do I need to come into this board and say, let's tear everything down? We don't need to do that. We don't believe we need to do that. We purchased the property, it's no secret, it's public record. We purchased the property for $1.32 million. We invested initially $650,000. We put down X amount of dollars for the acquisition of the property. Then we went back to our bank and we told them, well, we got a problem. They said, well, what's the issue? I said, we're doing much better. I got a higher demand and I think I can get all the other buildings now up, which were not in the original plans. They said, what do you need? I told them about 30 days ago, they lent us an additional $1.7 million. So we have into this property close to $4 million, not just from what the bank loan is, but additional funds out of pocket that we put out. We put up X amount of dollars for the bank they wanted for monthly payments. We secured everything we needed. We've got the contractors in place. But like I said, all I'm asking for this board, if they would graciously do, is return this back to the building department to say, as long as I maintain the pictures in which you see the tongue and groove boards and stuff on the outside and putting nature-like pictures, roofs on the house and stuff, and wrapping the soffit, some windows, some doors, that's it. That, I believe, is the extent of the historical designation, is the exterior aspect of the property, not necessarily the interior. But with that said, right now, like I said, we want to get the outside of the buildings done, get them just secured, get them looking nice. Some of the pictures I submitted to you, you'll see where there was graffiti all on the buildings. We had a company come in, all we did is use primer. We wanted to clean the building up. We wanted if people were going to rent the units, as I was finishing the units that are available to be rented, I want the community to look good. That's my job, that's my reputation, and that's what I will do. So if we weren't committed to this, we wouldn't have gone back and asked for more money to the bank. I see the plus to this, and I see it because we've got a list of people that want to rent from us. We get people but I can't do anything until I get past the requirement. Phase 1, just secure the outside of the building. Phase 2 will deal with the services being attached to all the buildings. So we have them. We can't work in these buildings and clean them up, put sewer, which is hopefully down the road, but the septic systems have all been cleaned out. There's no problems with the septic systems that are predated. The electrical, the gas, I need to make sure they're in the building, but I need to first make sure that I have a structure when I bring that gas to the building. I don't have to worry about that building falling down next to the gas line. And that's why when Orange and Rockland approached me about moving the electrical out of the woods, I was all for it. Quite honestly, it's costing us $50,000 more than we expected, but it doesn't matter. When we get said and done with this, Pam and I will be controlling and owning probably close to 40 rentals. My first goal in life is when I go to sleep at night, I don't want to wake up the next morning worrying about what happened to one of the rentals, that I didn't do something that I should have done. That's a big thing with us. That's why we spend so much in Rest Haven, over $2 million in Rest Haven, because we wanted to protect an historical aspect of Monroe. I find it's important. And it needs to be done. And with that, I just want to let you know, the professionals that are working with us currently, and you recognize some of these names, Sparak and Youngblood is going to be taking over the survey. The survey was done by CV Associates, and that's because if we want to look at sewer, we need to use Steve Sparacco as an engineer to formulate that. But that's the end product. Dave DeMarco, there's pending application for buildings number 33 and 35, no, 33. What we did to make it easier for the building department is we did a prototype, because the buildings are pretty much similar in nature. We did one prototype of the building of what we want to do, so Ben can make a decision what codes we have to follow and what codes we don't have to follow. And this is all interior I'm referring to. If he gives me one prototype of, Tim, you need to do this, and then we know to duplicate it on all the remaining 15 buildings. We know we don't come back to Ben after every building. What do? You know, it becomes monotonous for Ben and for me. His office is busy enough without me. We want to make sure it's done. So he needs this back too, so he can give us clearance so we can start that process, which is the end process. So the first process, as I said, is let's get the buildings back. That's where you can say, yes, we're going to pass on it. We're going to allow Ben to do. He can report back to you. We can give you updates on it. I mean, it doesn't bother me. I mean, I put this stuff all on Facebook, so if you ever want to watch it, go right ahead. It's called Pinecrest Bungalow Colony, Monroe. So we're here tonight to ask you to do that. The second phase will be the utility upgrades, and the third phase will determine with Ben what the uses can or cannot be. Because if you also read your historical status, well, there's a little more leadway in terms of what you can do with the buildings and what you can't. And the first and foremost to us is we're in residential rentals. We're here to get tenants in the place. And that's what I was. So getting back to the list, you then have Peter Torgerson, who did the wetland programs for you. You have Bart Roddy. He's an engineer from Congress who did the engineering for the barn. And he will do any further engineering as we need it and as it calls for on Ben's part to do it. It will be submitted to Ben. And of course, everything, and we will not give the building codes, but everything will be done to code, if not exceed code. And if you have not been in the property or have never visited a property, I suggest you do. I really do. You stand there, and most people, even the ones that grew up here, can't believe they're standing in the middle of Monroe. So call us the Central Park of Monroe. But we're not going to let the community go down, and I need your help to stop it. And your help would be letting Ben move forward with it and follow the required building codes and get those buildings secured for the safety of not only people that are living on the property. One family just moved in, two cops down in New York City. They just moved in. They want to move up here and be cops up here. Maybe a village will be hiring. But they're here. We have a young lady who moved from Greenwood Lake who became single, living on the property. She's a dog walker. We got another couple from Long Island that moved up here. They want one house fixed as soon as possible so they can let their mother-in-law move in so they can watch the kids, because they got two little kids. And then we got another family that sold their house last year, and they were looking for a place. They came in and they wanted a place. They wanted to stay in Monroe. They were due to leave in July, and I get a phone call that they want to stay an extra month because their daughter came from school, and the daughter wants to be with her friends this summer before they move to the Carolinas. This is the type of people we have. Over on Sergio, we have 7 rentals. I have one lady there. Oh God, I hope no one else hasn't up with this. She's been there since 1986. She's still there. We got another couple. We've had people there for 10 years, 15 years. So we run a good facility. We pay attention. We're under that property. We're under the guidance of the Department of Health for New York State because we have well water there, but we have natural gas too. So the importance is to ensure that we can move on this sooner than later. even if it is a repeat of coming back before you and just updating you accordingly so you're aware of everything going on. With that said, unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight, but Joe McKay has been retained to work, his firm, to work with us as well to make sure everything stays within compliance for code as well. I'm trying to think of what else I can tell you. That's a lot in 5 minutes.
So perhaps we can review some things with you. Before we start getting to questions for you and some comments from our consultant. So as I understand, you're here before us because Ben said you needed to have us do a historical review on the project. That was one of the things that he needed before he can move forward with his determinations on what you're going to need to do so he can issue permits.
This is correct according to your historical section. It requires an external review by your board, or your board has the option to pass on it if they feel, and to return it to Ben if they feel Ben is competent of handling it on his own.
So,
And that's in 5232C, AC, 57-32C.
has this property received any kind of historical designation like your work on Rest Haven?
Not to the level of what Rest Haven is, but Rest Haven also, we purchased that without the designation, and the designation came along later. In this case, we purchased it, and the designation was given by the town historian as allowed by law. And he issued a designation letter. I believe you should be in possession of that letter.
I haven't seen that letter.
You haven't seen that letter?
No, and that's something.
Yeah,
that
Jim
that I
Nelson.
should-
Jim
Sure.
Nelson signed off on it.
Okay, so that's important.
We can forward that to you right away.
Yeah, we should certainly have that.
It was actually in Ben's referral. It's
Okay.
attached to his letter.
Yeah, I don't have that information. I have everything but Ben's referral. So, with this in mind, no one who is currently sitting on the board, Bonnie and I go back 6 years, everyone else is a little newer than that, has gone through the historical review process. I don't think the historical review process has been used since our new zoning was in place at the end of 2017. With that in mind, so for the board's benefit, I just want to talk a little bit about what's involved in us doing a historical review, since this is a new type of project for us. So, as Mr. Mitz referenced, everything in relation to that is found in our code under 5732. And its purpose is hereby declared that the preservation of historic sites, areas, and buildings and landmarks in the town of Monroe is essential to the general welfare of the community. And the purpose of this section is to, number one, safeguard the heritage of the town of Monroe by preserving sites and districts in the town which reflect its mining, agricultural, cultural, social, economic, political, and architectural history. Number two, protect buildings and structures and areas in the town which are recognized as architecturally historic sites and landmarks. Number three, ensure that new development considers any potential impact on adjoining historic buildings and structures. Number four, stabilize and improve property values. Number five, foster civic beauty. And number six, strengthen the local economy. So in relation to the project that Mr. Mitz and Ms. Lee are bringing before us, it seems like number one, number two, number five, and very possibly number six, if we're talking about rental units, whether seasonal or year-round, all apply to this. And that's what we're really taking under consideration is, does what's being proposed here meet the needs that we're talking about under those four items? So if the town historian has designated this as, is recognized them as architecturally historic sites and landmarks, and they certainly have cultural, social, architectural, historical value, as pointed out in number one, that this is a project well worth our time and consideration. So that was the first thing that I wanted to know was the Pinecrest Bungalow Colony designated as a historical site? And you've informed me that it has been. As I said, I'd like to review that myself, and I think we're going to need some more information on those things. Yes,
Not
please.
sure, when Ben, when I refer him to as Ben because, we have a casual relationship, forgive me, but when I referred it up, he said he sent the file up to you, and in the file, you should have the designation because it was one of the requests he made. It was made on December 4th of last year. But I'm not sure, but he claimed he sent everything up to you that you...
October 4th.
October 4th? Right, so perhaps in preparing for this meeting, I didn't go back far enough.
Just so
in
you
the,
know.
What I'd located on the project, both from my paperwork and an email, I hadn't come across that, but I will look further.
Yeah.
Yeah?
The original stuff from Ben had gone to Bonnie, Ashley, and Sean.
Okay.
It wasn't sent out to the whole board at that point. And when we did do this submission, I totally forgot that was there. So I will send it, I can't send it from here. I will send it on Monday,
Terrific.
and then everybody will have that part as well.
All right. So before I move forward, I'd like to turn over to our. No. No. I'd like to get some input from our consultants on what it is that we're. No, I'll keep going. Welcome. I'd like to get some input from our consultants on what it is that we're working on accomplishing here for this application. Sean, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So we covered a lot with the applicability, or Jeff did, on why the board is getting involved. So in order to deem the application complete, 57-32H identifies a number of items that the applicant will have to provide. I'm not going to go over every single one, but I think the most important one for the board to actually make a decision is going to be some kind of narrative on what's going to happen to each building. The applicants are provided photos of the existing buildings, and for lack of a better term, a printout of a shopping cart from Home Depot of the list of materials that he's going to be constructing the exterior of the buildings with, but it's not clear as to what buildings will be constructed and or demoed. As a number of the photos, you can see that I don't think the applicant's going to be reconstructing the existing.
Just to correct the record for you, the shopping cart I thought was submitted to you, but again, if you refer back to Ben's file, he said he sent you the entire file up. You'll have those costs in there because it's part of the requirement. Merely if you look at the picture and the picture says it's a groove and tongue board building, that's what's going back there. And I know I did provide that because I knew you're going to want that.
Yeah, so the pictures were provided, but
Okay, that's interesting, that picture. I'm glad you brought that picture up. What I gave you pictures, by the way, hello, Bonnie, it's nice to see you again. The picture you brought up is a good one, and this is why I suggest you take a visit to the property. That building is great on 3 sides except for one, because that's where the roof was bad. So the porch that you see that's there was partially taken down since we originally got there because of safety and security to the property. That whole wall is one of the permits. If you look at each of the permits that were referred up to you, they are specific to the building. With that, I also gave you a map that indicates where that building is located in proximity of the property, because every building on that property now has a 911 address, which is what we were also required to do as a 911 address. So if you go to building number 37, that building will be there. You will have a building permit. We specifically put a building permit in to replace that one wall because the other 3 walls were not a problem.
Right,
And
so-
that's why I'm strongly suggesting a visit if you have questions like that. But that's typically why you got those pictures.
Sure, so that's why I'm suggesting
Yeah, I
a
appreciate it.
narrative be provided with.
We did with the building permits.
Right, so that'll have to be submitted to the planning board as
They
well.
didn't send the building permits up because Ben said he sent them up.
He handed me the packet of 11.
Okay. 11, okay, 11 of them. Okay.
He packet of 11.
Okay,
And he sent a partial one via email.
okay.
Went to, as I said a few minutes ago, went to Bonnie, Sean.
Oh, okay. Same
Actually,
package
at
you're
the
talking about?
prior,
Okay,
yes.
okay, so you have the narrative of what the permit is gonna, each permit per building's gonna be, and it's gonna
I
be,
can find-
yeah, it's gonna be asphalt roofing and whatever the siding is on the building. Like I said, we're focusing merely on the external, but I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that I'm giving you everything I thought. There is only one building that's being demoed right now, and that is building number 59, which is not part of this whole thing, because as far as I'm concerned, I don't know what we can do about rebuilding it, and I had told Ben I want to leave it off because we've got enough work to do on the other buildings. All he's requiring me to do is block it off for now.
But can I just ask why it's not subject to the historical review?
It's on the ground, the building. So the question is whether it can even be rebuilt again, or Ben's going to say to me, after inspection, you can't rebuild that building.
Because the board has jurisdiction over demolition as well as part of this historic review, so.
Again, I was, like you, I've dealt with the historical review on the village side, as Bonnie's well aware, and like you, it's my first time too, so I'm trying to figure it out the best I can. But that would be stipulated even to this board, no matter what you do, I would come back to the board first before I did anything with the building. Because like I said, it's also tucked in the woods a little bit away from everything, so you really can't even see it unless you're going down a dirt road that's on the side. But I appreciate you pointing that out.
And then the only other thing I would like to ask, I had a member of my office go out to take a look at and take some pictures. You mentioned the excavations were for electric and natural gas only for the install.
So the current excavation that's at the property is electric and cable. Orange and Rockland had me use an outside contractor to do that, who is Rick Beam from Volcan Construction. Oh, you remember Mary Ellen Beam, relative of hers. He's doing, and the son of Rick Beam Sr. He's doing all the excavating, all of it from beginning to end. That's where the $50,000 came into play in the transaction. Because originally I thought Orange and Rockland, I was led to believe, was doing everything, but they want to run the gas lines, and they're getting ready to through a. We thought they were going to do one joint ditch. They then came back and said, no, we're not doing one joint ditch. You put the electric and cable in one, and we're going to put the gas in the other. So, and that's all under their jurisdiction. I have no say-so of anything except for what they tell me. So
Yeah,
that's what they would have seen that day.
That's what I just wanted to understand, what the
No,
excavations
I appreciate it.
were, so.
Anything you need.
All right, so I have a copy of my comment letter here if you'd like to.
What's that?
This is a copy of my comment letter if you'd like
Okay.
to take it.
Fine with my response here. Do you need me to write your response to these, or my comments here are sufficient?
Really up to the board, but generally they
Okay.
are responded to.
Yeah,
in
we
writing.
prefer that the responses be in writing.
Okay, no problem.
Ashley?
I think Sean's comments really hit pretty much everything as far as the historic review process, what's needed for you to complete that. A couple of questions just based on what was discussed earlier. So for purposes of seeker, of course, you have limitations on the ability to segment review. So I know the applicant spoke about this phased project in some sorts. So just to make sure the planning board has an understanding of what those phases might look like, because that might trigger then the need for more environmental review if there's a plan for, a change of use or something like that. It sounds like you're still exploring what can be done.
Yes, that is correct. We're still exploring, because until we know what buildings we have and what Ben tells me can or cannot be done based on his opinion, that's not a concern of us with the use. The more important thing is the maintaining of these structures and getting them to move forward. Even if it's being allowed right now while the board is reviewing this, is to go in and at least start structurally securing these dilapidated walls, even if they're not completed. Everything we do has pictures to it. We have before, during, and after pictures wherever we could get them. But that's my biggest concern is securing the property and getting a roof on them. But that's correct. So your first phase, to reiterate, as you were saying, is let's secure the buildings. Second one is let's finish up the upgrade, get everything out of the woods and get the place secured in terms of utilities. Third will be the phase when I would probably or may have to come back to this board and say, hey, now let Ben says this or I say this, and what do we do with the use? Because as you're aware, and as Mr. Manson had mentioned earlier, it's a new area to all you as well as to us. I have concepts, but my concept doesn't mean I can do it in the end. The concept means that I have to get those buildings done first, and that's the most important thing, and the only thing that I'm discussing. Everything else doesn't matter. So those buildings are.
So building permits have been applied for. Have any building permits been granted to you at this point?
Yes. When I first came in, we did immediately apply for permits on 33, 35, 31, and 29. All of them new roofs. No, excuse me, 31, sorry, let me rephrase, excluding 31, 35, 33, 35, 29, sorry, 29, 30, 35 permits were requested and granted for the replacement of the roofs. 31 was the only thing was a ramp was put in for access to the second floor to make the unit more accessible to people that need it, including handicap, because now the ramp goes from the ground into that first floor as opposed to coming from the back dirt road that's caught between the upper and lower and trying to get upstairs. The lady that lived there, an elderly lady, which is a former owner, one of the Grandma Runko, I guess you would call her, she had to use a seat to get upstairs where everything was. So we took the initiative of making that little change so we could make it more accessible. I understand handicaps. My brother's a handicap, so I appreciate the need of our people getting in.
So a question for you, Ashley. My understanding is under 5732B, if I'm following this correctly, the building inspector shall not issue a building permit or demolition permit until a certificate of approval of the plans has been issued by the planning board. No property, building, or structure shall be constructed, altered, repaired, moved, or demolished unless such action complies with the requirements hereafter set forth. Were there already things in process, and it was then later on determined by Ben that this historical review was required? Is that the
What happened
I'm trying to
there-
understand timeline
I'm not
and how.
sure if it was perhaps before the historical designation was given, or,
Yeah, to give you a
Right.
yeah.
just to give you a correct timeline. Oh, is that Mr. Nelson's letter?
I believe that's Mr. Nelson's letter. I wanted to bring it up because I think it helps with the timeline.
Thank you, Bonnie. Just to give you all the timeline of this whole process, because
Thank you.
it is very important, as you point out. February 13, 2022, we closed on the, February 16, 2022, we closed on the property. The designation wasn't given until October 14th, 2022. Some 6 months or so later. In the meantime, we had already taken the initiative, again, in the same phase, in the same vein, in order to secure the buildings. If you look at number 33 and 35, on the old pictures, there were break in the roofs where there was leakage and things going on.
Quick question. When you say there were efforts between February and October to secure the buildings, was there a building permit application at that
Yes, ma'am.
point, or you had already started doing the work and then sought the building permit?
No, ma'am. All new roofs. One thing I'm very conscious of is building permits.
Okay.
We've had to pay violation fees because the old owner had violations,
Okay.
and that was fine. But no, I don't do things without a permit. And if I make a mistake, I do. But Ben and I have been working together for 20 years, so
Okay. So,
Yeah.
so between February and October,
permits
you
were
had
issued.
got- building permits were issued. then this letter came October 4th.
Right.
Had you petitioned Mr. Nelson to get the historic designation, or how did that come about?
I asked him his opinion if he would be willing to designate it historical, and that was in July, but I heard nothing from him. I didn't receive anything until October 4th, just shortly after the date of this letter, which then Ben contacted me and said, going forward, since you now have the designation, I have to go to the planning board to get certain things, or, follow
Right.
whatever, and that's where we're at now. No more permits have been issued since.
Okay, so in terms of requesting the historic designation process, what was your thinking in terms of why you did that? And is it related to, are you looking for funding through some historic preservation funding credits, or sort of why did you seek the historic designation? And then, is this all there is in terms of why it's historic? Because I think for us to be able to evaluate the changes, we need to know what makes it historic. Because if it's just a historic bungalow community, because of the fact it's a bungalow community, that's different than if it's the architectural character of the bungalows. They have a particular cedar shake or whatever. Because what I think we would allow in terms of materials depends on, again, I think what specifically is driving its historic nature.
Right. If you could, because I'm not good at remembering a lot of things. I've got a lot of my brains. The first question you had asked was, can you repeat that again?
So one of the questions was, did you seek this for any particular reason? Are you getting historic tax credit funds or something, or why did you seek
Okay.
it?
Yes, we did seek it. We felt that it was an important part of Monroe, as I stated in my open comment before you got here.
Yeah, sorry that I'm
No,
late.
that's okay. Appreciate your time tonight. But the reality is, bungalow communities is what made Monroe originally. That's what it was all about. I indicated to the board, we have people that live around us that are coming to visit me saying, hey, I used to come here when I was a kid. I've got people from far away. I don't know if you know John Green. He wants to come back and visit. Even Runco, not Claire, Metnetta. She comes back and visits once in a while to see what's going on. A lot of them are talking about coming back and visiting. I've had people call me and say, hey, can I rent out a seasonal? Are you going to do seasonal? And I said, well, got to wait for the planning board.
Okay.
So yes, we
So-
did seek it. And just so you know, to answer the further question, there is no tentative tax credit available to this.
Okay.
This is strictly just like Rest Haven, which is well-known fact. We've put over $2 million into Rest Haven of our own money. Now, after the fact, if this property was to make it to the national level, then I can attach corporate tax credits I would get back for the improvements. But at this point, the project doesn't run relevant for that. All we know right now from historical records is Dr. something other owned the property prior to the Runcos, who purchased it in 1969, and we were provided with that survey from 1969. So as of now, this is strictly corporate finance. We're not asking for any taxpayer dollars whatsoever.
When you obtained the property, was it all unoccupied at that point because of the condition of the buildings?
No, ma'am. The buildings, let me rephrase my answer for you. There's 20 buildings on 20 acres, recreation hall, in-ground pool, and a 2-acre lake on the property.
Okay,
It all belongs to the property within the boundary of the property, so you know.
understood.
And we have also, through Peter Torgerson, done wetlands analysis already, and it's handwritten in the maps. You'll see his handwriting. It's just a surveyor's got to convert over. Numbers 25, 29, 31, and 41, were the buildings that were being lived in.
So they were being lived in at the time you
At the
purchased
time of
it?
purchase, yes.
They had C of Os?
Excuse me?
They had C of Os?
These buildings were built in 1930. There were no COs back then.
Okay. Were they, but in other words, were they winterized already? Were they?
No, they were occupants year-round. The Runco family lived on the property. Claire lived in 25. The grandmother lived in 31, but when she passed, Claire's son moved into there. Netta's son lived in 29, and Netta was living in what is now 41, but then Netta left and she rented it. She rented the building out up until the day we purchased it.
It was almost like a family compound that they were using.
In the end, that's what it was.
Okay.
They didn't want to maintain from what we gather in my conversations, they had no interest in maintaining the campground,
Okay.
or the summer seasonal bungalows.
Okay.
And that's obvious. Look at the condition.
So it was a seasonal bungalow community, but several of them
Were year-round.
Were year-round, and they had already been converted to year-round use because,
I can't
in
use
other
the
words,
word-
did they have heating and electric heaters that they could
they
use?
had everything in it. I
Okay.
can't say they were converted because Mr. Runco, who purchased the old man, purchased it in 1969, was living there. And the house Claire was in, the stone house that first came in.
That's his house? That's the one that was being occupied?
That was one being, I'm talking about only the ones that were occupied.
Yeah, because I am, and again, I'm trying to get the history of this.
Yeah.
The main house is almost like would have been the caretaker or owner's house.
No, the owners lived on the property.
No, but in other words, in a typical bungalow community, that main building
Oh, yes.
might have been like the caretaker, and then he was taking care of all the other seasonal bungalows.
Right.
And then people come up in the summer, and then they enjoy the lake, and they enjoy the pool, et cetera.
Right, but in
Okay.
talking with Ben, the buildings I gave you, 25, 29, 31, and 41, were always occupied as far as he knows as well, because there's discussion about the use of the building, but there's no discussion about them actually being used.
Okay.
And we actually just recently upgraded the services on the buildings because we're converting to gas, so I wanted new equipment. Natural gas, I should say.
Okay. So the history of the bungalow community is that it was a bungalow community, and that's part of the history of Monroe. It wasn't the particular architecture of the buildings.
It's the social and environmental aspect. There was another one that was mentioned here that was very much, culturally, socially, economically, the property's always contributed to Monroe. And we intend on to recontributing to Monroe just the same way Rest Haven contributes to Monroe, just the way Sergio, which you may not know, and I mentioned to the board, Sergio Lane over by the Country Deli. It's a bunch of bungalows back there. Pam and I own all of that too, from the back fence to the lake. And again, it's providing economic to the community because we get long-term rentals who want to stay.
Yeah, I know. They're around the lakes. There are definitely homes that still exist that are tiny little 400, 300 square foot houses that were
We have
bungalows.
one or two of those.
And
We
then
have-
they got kind of converted.
Yeah.
And they literally have like a bedroom and a single room, but people use them for housing.
Oh, yeah.
So I've definitely seen those.
Yeah.
Jim Nelson's designation specifically calls out the architectural detail of the buildings. And I think that in our
That's-
review,
Exactly.
that has to be something taken into consideration as far as you provide us a couple of before and after shots on some of the buildings. We really need to get a little more into the weeds of what we can expect from what we see now to what the finished product is going to be like. Not only is that what we're going to need for our review to make a determination, but it's really what's called out under the section, H2, and it starts to run into some points about what we need as far as a completed application. You provided us photographs of all the buildings, but one of the things that it calls for is a brief description of the structures to be altered or demolished, and some of the details on what we need that.
And that's in the permits. I stand by
Okay.
with the permit. I think that's the best source to use, so I'm not redundant, because they're building specific. Although they may be general in nature, I think the pictures themselves stand to explain.
If they're building specific in the
Yeah.
permits, then that'll help.
Yeah.
Another thing, it asks for a past 10-year chronology of the use, occupancy, and ownership of the property under the code. It would really be helpful to have a full narrative. The history goes back, as you said, to 1930, and as much information as we can have about Pinecrest bungalow colony and how it was used, how it impacted Monroe, what the ownership was like, and how that passed through the Runcos, and how that ultimately came into your ownership.
As far as the ownership chain of the property, I have provided you with the title report that was just done that shows you the chain of ownership from owner to owner, dating back whatever years they did, at least 10 years or more. I think the father died in the late 90s. The girls took it. They owned it up until they sold to us. But that's in the title report.
It speaks to ownership, but it doesn't really speak to use and occupancy. Right.
Okay.
Right, that will be in the, there are drawings, I know there's a more robust material list in with the permits you mentioned. How about construction drawings of
There really was no need for construction drawings because we have to follow the footprint of the building, period. And if there's like in this one picture that was, which I appreciate, it's very explanatory. If you come and look at the building, the three sides of the building have no issues. The one wall needs to be replaced. I'm not sure how a drawing would help in this case because I would see it as an interest if we were doing the whole building, staying within the footprints but it's one wall in every case that's being fixed. And that would limit our need and scope. And I tried to limit our needs and scope to what we needed to do before we got to the other issues on the end point with Ben.
questions about some of the application materials that we did receive? I'm in the Town of Monroe Planning Board application on the second page, F. Do you G. Are all of the public spaces shown on the layout to be dedicated for public use?
I'm sorry, which page? I'm sorry?
Yep, page 2 of the Planning Board application.
Planning Board application, H and Q?
Planning Board application, page 2.
Oh, page 2, sorry.
Yep, letter G.
Letter G. Let's see.
So are all the public open spaces shown on the layout to be dedicated for public use? And you've indicated yes.
Yeah, meaning that there is an in-ground pool, there's a lake, there's the old recreation hall. That survey that you have that's current mirrors the survey from 1969.
This question really speaks to whether it's being proposed to be dedicated to the town essentially as a
Oh,
public.
my
So I
apologies,
think-
and I misunderstand, and no, it's not, nothing's being dedicated to the town.
And I think it's really more a question, for a
Right.
subdivision, so I assumed that, thanks
Yeah,
for pointing that out.
to
I
me-
figured that was meant to be no, but just
Right,
thank
yeah,
you for
to me,
clarifying.
when you say public use, I think of my tenants using the property. It's
And-
public, it's a
right,
public
and-
common
and
area.
what we're looking at is
Yeah.
a general public use.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I,
no.
I think I would recommend that you update that to no.
Okay. To clear this up, just so you know, okay, we do have a hydrologist report for the property.
Yep.
The property is water self-sufficient. The sewer systems work, the new gas lines are coming in, all the electrical, as I said, is going underground. So this will be a self-sustaining property without any public service use or any taxpayer dollars because it's a private road. Guess who gets to plow it? Yours truly.
Oh, just a quick question, because we've been talking about what it was used for, and you're making all these improvements to it. What do you propose to use it for? Because it sounds like of all the buildings, I think you said there are 20 buildings on 20 acres. Of the 20 buildings, are you upgrading all of them, or are there a certain number that you feel, given their condition, you have to demolish?
In my opinion, right now, based on my review of the property, and one of the big issues with the building department when we got there in violations was the amount of junk that was inside these buildings. They never cleaned them out, so when the roof collapsed, you can imagine. I had the what do you call those black birds all over the all over the buildings. They were housing on top. I tried to get them to pay rent. They wouldn't pay rent until I cleaned out the buildings, and we clean the area up, and to my extent right now, I'm repairing every single building, bringing every building up to the code that I am required to per Ben, period. Whether it's seasonal or summer, I don't care. What would I like to do with it? That's a good question. I can see some good and bad to the whole project. Reality is, what's allowed by law, and Ben will make that determination. And his opinion right now is leave what I have year-round and make everything else seasonal. On the other hand, do I come back to this board and say, hey, look, I want to do this or this? One concept would be, because it's a concern of balancing act, our main concern is we have to have X amount of units, whatever that may be, to pay the mortgage, meet the obligations. The other units are just become overage and, excess revenue. Problem with the property is that and again, I implore that you do come and visit with me. I got a cart. If you can't walk, we'll cart you around, no problem. And my concern is that the lower field is harder to maintain during the winter months without putting a blacktop in. I don't want to put a blacktop in. We have a mid-road. Maybe that's an answer. But if I can't do that, then I can't use them year-round, or even request to be used round. The opt, obviously, would be able to use everything year-round. The optim, because we need the rentals here in Monroe. This is not anything but rocket scientists. I'm not reinventing the wheel. We're taking what we have in our community, protecting the environment, and still I'm able to cover the costs, and we're able to survive both the tenants and the operation, so we don't end up in the wrong hands. Because, we like what we do. I mean, you got to be crazy to own all these rentals.
So I think that the reason we ask about the use is that speaks to then the improvements that need to be made. Because if you're going to convert them to year-round, how you end up renovating the buildings is going to be different than if they're left seasonal.
I'm glad you raised that, and that is an important issue. And that's why we're in 3 phases instead of 1. I don't want to complicate things because it becomes too complicated. I sit here before you today and tell you all 20 buildings are going to be put back the way they looked. Maybe only 19 in the end, Ben will say I can do. Maybe he'll say 17 when we get into the crux of things. But without the approval of this board to let him evaluate it, we won't know that answer. So there will be a return of Summercrest to you guys, I promise you that. But my opt is to use it year-round. But there's 3 parts. The outside, which is merely securing the outside of the building, cleaning it up, making it look good. Architecturally, the real architectural is in part because it's all tongue and groove board and stuff. Now, when you go to, as you suggested, Bonnie, about if it becomes seasonal, that's an interior issue. It's really not an exterior issue to the building, because now I start getting into with Ben about the footings and about the drafts. The what do they call the insulation, or some sort of whatever they call the code. I don't remember, but that becomes Ben's terrain, because we've already talked about it. I've already mentioned to Ben and said, here's what I'm going to do. I've got 2x4 walls. Some say, okay, go use insulation if you decide to make it year-round. Well, the problem with spray insulation is once you spray it in, you can't snake anything through it. You can't service it. So the other option is, once these walls are secured, is you build a wall within the wall. So you have one wall, have the old wall on the outside, which is what I'm big about, and then you build a second wall behind it to get the R values. But until you allow me to reserve and get those buildings restored, Ben isn't going to tell me what I can or cannot do, because he's going to evaluate it based on each building. He's a tough cookie. I've been dealing with him 20 years, trust me.
Yeah, I'm just trying to weigh just understanding. So, for example, let's say you're using a particular kind of siding, and the siding there, ubiquitous is, tongue and groove wood. And so if you're trying to keep the architectural quality, you would want something the same. Correct. Or, which may be wood, which would be costly. So we wouldn't expect vinyl, for instance. But a vinyl-like product that mimics the wood appearance may be acceptable depending on what it is. So again, I'm just trying to understand, to what extent the use ends up dictating the architecturals as well.
Yeah. Now, the material's a good list, and unfortunately, everybody didn't see the building permits that were filed in. But if you look at the building permit, it specifically says we're using wood. We're using original product. The only issue you may have a problem, and it's really weird. If you look at these buildings, the ones that don't have tongue and groove are better walls than the ones that have the tongue and groove. That's why that picture you saw is where the tongue and groove gave, because when the roof collapsed, it gave on that side, and that's the only reason. Number
Number
37, number 37.
Yeah, I was
picture.
going to say, these were pictures that were taken by your office, so I can scroll through them. I wasn't sure if I could, but I can. So just to give everybody a sense of the building.
Now, that's that house you have there, that's 25 Pinecrest. That is the one Mr. and Mrs. Ronco used to live in when they purchased property in 1969.
So that's the biggest one that has the
That's the
stone
biggest
facade.
one. That's 3 bedrooms and 1 bath.
So that's actually a house. That was, what I was saying is that looks like it would have been whoever owned it, the caretaker, that was their main
I would
building.
assume so, too.
Oops. I was trying to download it, but it wouldn't let me download.
No?
No, it said I didn't have permissions. Let me see if this works.
You open again, use the arrow instead of the mouse and see if it goes, the right and left arrow.
Okay.
That is number 29. That had a permit for a new roof on it. We changed the propane tanks out on that. Interesting about the gentleman, I didn't describe about him before. He lived over on Sergio Lane in our big house there, four bedrooms, 2 baths with his mother and father, family of 5. His mother, father, him, and his 2 kids as a single father. Unfortunately, his father passed away. He's been with me over 10 years, maybe closer to 15 years. So when the father passed away, 2 of the kids moved out. It was him and his mother. His mother's in serious health. So they moved over to this property because they couldn't afford a 4-bedroom house anymore. But these are the type, again, back to the type of tenants that we keep in our property. The trailer next to it is for her medical supplies because there's not much storage in that particular house for medical supplies.
So that's the,
New roof.
so is that vinyl siding or is that?
That
the
is
tongue and
vinyl
groove?
siding, but that siding that was there when we got there, we've changed no siding on the house, on any of the houses. They've all been left the way they are.
So these may have been, so
That's
those
number-
ones that are occupied may have, they were already.
That one was
up
already
there. Okay.
occupied, yeah. The one you see in the distance there is number 35. You'll see the picture with all the graffiti as part of your package there, what it looked like before and after. This is number 33. This was given a new roof. We cleaned out around it. I didn't like the way it looked, so the way we cleaned up the buildings is we ended up just doing a primer only just to clean it up, make it look good. But if you look in the distance to the next building, yeah, that building to the right, but if you go back one, you look into the distance of the other building, that distant building is the back side of the dilapidated building that was pointed out to me by your consultant. So you can see the one side looks great. The 2 sides look great. But when you get to that front, you kind of look and go, holy cow, what just happened?
Is this one inhabited?
No.
Okay.
No. This one here, you're referring to 33? The one we can see full?
Not just the one we can see full, is that
That one,
inhabited?
no. That is an interesting building. That's number 33. There is in the building plans that were referred up to you, that is our prototype, I guess you call it, building. The one building where I said we use it as an example with the building department to determine everything that we need to do. Big thing about every single building that's vacant here is that the buildings are all being gutted inside, all new wiring, all new plumbing, all new everything. Kitchen, we don't waste money we spend it. If you look at any pictures of us on Facebook, you'll see I'm always posting our buildings, whether they're on Pinecrest or they're Rest Haven or if they're Sergio. You'll see the quality of what the work we do to get to tenants.
Did all the buildings have kitchens in them already?
Did what?
Did the buildings have kitchens in them?
All the buildings had kitchens in them.
Like little kitchenettes?
Yes.
Is there a fireplace, or what's the stone?
Yeah, anything you see with the top coming out of it is a technically a working fireplace if the cement would only stay together.
And is that siding already replacement, or is that
No,
original
ma'am.
siding?
That is the same siding. That's one of the sidings. I don't know if you can focus in on it, but that's one of those asbestos sidings or whatever you call from years ago. Those are the buildings that didn't collapse. That's the kicker to this. But the tongue and groove did, for the most part. But you can see that is all. No, we
I'm sorry,
did
you
not.
said what kind of siding?
It's the old asbestos siding,
is
the
a-
shingle.
So you're gonna have to get rid of that, or?
No, as long as you spray it and seal it, you're good.
Okay.
And that's the purpose of what we did here, is again, to clean it up. I figured at some point, somebody's gonna be coming in and looking at everything we're doing. If we're not working on it, we cleaned it up from the outside.
This the back
That's
side
it,
of
that's the front of the building we were just talking about.
Okay, so that has a little patio.
Yes, it has a patio coming out the front. They all have
Does it-
patios.
Does it? Because I don't see the chimney on it, unless it's hidden.
It's on the other side, and they're low chimneys. They're only
Okay.
about a foot and a half or so above the roof, below
Okay.
the roof, I mean, from the roof.
And is that dirt, is that the trenching you're talking
That's all
about?
dirt. That was originally taken, that's the trenches
Okay,
for the utilities.
saw that one.
That's the same building.
Look at that.
That's 35
Tree.
we were speaking about. That has a new roof. That had also issues where the roof had collapsed in, but meaning that the roof rotted through. But what we did is with the permit prior to the October 4th date, our focus was replacing, getting sides fixed up and roofs. It wasn't about anything with the seasonal buildings, let's call them.
So in terms of architecture, it looks like they all have gable roofs. They seem to have, a lot of them, these stone piers. I don't know what the original door was. That doesn't look original.
That's original door, believe it or not. And you
Is
know
it?
why? Because
So
you
they had
walked
the-
in and the kitchen was right to your right.
So they had the glass pane in it for the original door?
Oh, no, the door is not original, but the location of the door is.
Oh, okay, so the door is newer.
The door is
Okay.
new because it was a door that wasn't there. It was broken. And you'll see, like here in this building, we took an old door from inside and we nailed it to the front of the door because one of the issues was securing that property so there was no issues.
But this would be the ones, the tongue and groove. This is the original.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Was that fire damage on the side, or just
No, ma'am, that's
deteriorated?
collapse of the roof. If you look at, if you can go back for a minute, just so you have it. If you look at the base in front, that was another porch. That roof collapsed, which took the main roof down. So when we came in, it was full of garbage. So we've paid out about $30,000 to date. We had a guy come in with his truck and trailer, and they emptied these buildings out. We got 4 more buildings to empty out, and then one that has to be removed. But we had to leave stuff in place because, according to Ben, if he didn't see it, we can't rebuild it.
That looks like that probably, well, I don't know if that's an original door.
The
'cause
next-
You said that was moved from an interior door to
What's that?
secure it. The door, you said that was an interior door that you put in the
That
front
we put on the outside
to
because
secure it?
To secure the
Yeah.
building, yeah, correct. That's the building we were just talking about. But if you notice, you saw the back side of the building, and now you're looking at the front side of the building. What a difference between day and night. And that's why our focus is mainly on the dilapidated side. And you'll see it, there you go, you can see it there. The second building in where you were there late. You didn't see me mowing, huh? Where the mower is, that's the building that's dilapidated that I called number 37. That is what it looked like on the back side. So what I'm doing is continuing what you see there around the front and repairing. And I'm hoping, I'm not one to break things down and not reuse it because, again, it costs money too. And that is all that tongue and groove on the front, as long as it's not rotted, can be taken down and reused again. It just becomes a puzzle.
What are the foundations for these?
The architect, I would defer to the architect plans for 33 because he addresses all that in the architectural plans.
In other words, existing, were they stone foundations? Were
Stone
they
foundation, that I
concrete?
believe.
They were stone?
I believe they were stone foundations. But again, I defer to the plans for 33. This is the backside of the buildings. You can see, I mean, like the roof is only, this is a small part of the building. If you were to go back one picture, this is a section where they had the kitchen in. And the roof is the problem, but the building's not.
Yeah, it's interesting, looking at this picture at least, and it's not uncommon, some of the bungalows actually didn't have foundations. They almost had like cinder block or stilts, exactly. And I'm just looking at that protruding entry, and underneath it looks like there's posts or something other than like a foundation.
No, there's foundation. As far as I know, there's foundation to them all. I did find some buildings no longer existing that were posts. I'm familiar with those too. And there's another one that's similar to what was on the one before, but you'll see it's not as dilapidated.
Yeah.
And again, we're back to.
Are you pulling the roofs off and then
What we're
you're
doing
putting
is
new
pulling the roof.
rafters and you're putting new rafters and new?
Whatever requires. Now,
Okay.
sometimes you can get away where it did not break through the roof. The wood is still good. It's amazing what I've learned between Rest Haven and here is as long as you got a good roof and a nice siding in the house, you never had a problem with the inside of the house.
I would say in this particular one, it must have been updated because the patio is going into the window.
You know what? That's a very good question. I couldn't figure out that either.
And-
But in fact, the one before was the same way.
I think in terms of color, and we'll see this when we get an opportunity to do a field visit, but I'm noticing this pattern of it looked like at one point they decided to make it look bungalowish by having that reddish barn red
And that's the intent.
trim.
It's a maroon color. Every building on the property except for the rec hall was white with the maroon color around wood trim. And that's the building on the end that you were just looking at.
There you can clearly see a post. So again, I don't think that particular part of the building, not that the entire thing is not on something, but that one seems to have a post there or something.
Well, then that's why he was leaving deferring to the architect, Dave Namakos.
Namako?
He's handling that part of the equation. The engineer we hired, who I believe you guys may be familiar with, who did I say? It's Brad Roddy out of Congers. He's handling all the engineering stuff
Okay.
as far as the buildings go. And then Sparaco and Youngblood are going to be doing all the other engineering and updating surveys and everything else going forward.
What is this building here? Ooh,
That building is a two-family building. You can see the two doors. Nothing has changed since we purchased the property. It's exactly what it looks like.
was that built at around the same time as that other stone
According
building?
to the 1969 survey and according to county records, which are obviously limited, this particular picture was part of the tax records on the county until the tax assessor removed it recently, back in October, which I complained about, but he said he wasn't putting it back up. But it's good information to know. You can see two doors, two roofs, one's indented, one's lower than the other. There's two sewer systems, two septic systems, to that building. There's two electrical panels, one for each side. There's two rear entrances to that, and so forth.
Clarify what number that one is?
Pardon?
Could you clarify what number building that is?
Oh, that was number 41, A and B.
Okay.
That's one of the buildings. That's number 40. I believe that's 43. And we need to get in there. There's some issues with the floor. That's the rec hall known as 45 Pinecrest. We painted the outside again to clean the property up. Forgive me, let me correct myself from earlier. We got a permit for this too, and this roof was changed, meaning cleaned up, because there were issues inside. I don't know if you took pictures inside or not when you were there, but you'll see the wood floors were restored back to what they were. They wanted me to tear them all out, and I told them we were crazy. They're 2-inch tongue and groove wood. They're all about a ½ inch thick.
Oak?
Huh?
Oak?
Oak. Yes, thank you. And I think it's even red oak. I tend to get confused on that a little bit. So what we did with that is, we did get a building permit for that roof. We did open it, we did close it to get it secured because there were holes in that roof as well that deteriorated the floor. So there were 2 areas in the floor where they were actually falling through. We came in, we put 5/4 or a half-inch sheet plywood down, we threw new oak floor on top of it and tried to make it look and mix it as much as possible. That work was, as all of my floors are done, and you may have seen on Rest Haven, was done by Shane's Flooring. He does all my floors to make sure they're done right. That's number 47. That's not in bad condition, it just looks terrible on the outside. But you can see there's 2 different type of sidings. It's just what fell off over time. My position would be is to use the white siding because was the last known design on the building. Now, if the board feels different, that's fine. But the siding, it looks like it's like shingle or something on the side, on the darker siding.
It looks like the shingle underlaid the white,
Yes.
and I don't know if that was just always almost like insulation, almost in cement, I don't know. It also has open rafters under the roof line, and then you have your chimney.
All right, here's my nightmare. This is
say so.
49 Pinecrest. But again, it's the same problem. 3 walls are good, 1 wall's bad. The thing's still standing. It's easier to build a new wall than to build a new building, especially at today's rate. And so the idea there, and this is why the scaffolding is there, was to put a new baseboard across, a plate across, and then build up again, reinforce the floor walls, and then put new 2x4s or whatever is required, 2x6 across for the rafters. And to shore up the wall before it fell. Because this is something that, it costs a lot more. And if you look at the color to the left where the porch is, it's similar to everything else that you've seen so far. But just to go back when you saw 33 and 35, those aren't final colors or final paints. They're just cleaning it up. People want to drive in and see, not look like they're living in somewhere they don't want to be.
One longer structure?
Yes, ma'am, it is. It's actually, and this is part of what I need to go through with Ben once the buildings are secure, is some of these lower buildings actually contain 2 units in each building, except for the first one that I referred to as 43. These 2 on the low, the 3 on the lower have 2 bathrooms, 2 kitchens, two everything, except for they're only 1 bedroom. But
this is what I think we get a little bit into, because we're a planning board, into what is versus what was. Because this may have been used as like a duplex seasonal building. But in renovating it, you're renovating it up to a 2-family, let's say, or to have, let's say, for argument's sake, 2 units, but it's been vacant and it hasn't been used. And 2 families aren't allowed in that zoning district, as far as I know. Or they may be allowed by special permit, but I don't recall. I think
they're not allowed in the district, except to the extent, I believe the historical status would give us a little flex, or no?
No, not at all.
Okay,
I think
well, that's,
the
and again,
historical status does have some adaptive uses, but
That might not
Not-
be one of them.
I
Yeah,
don't
so,
believe so. I don't think
right.
they're really residential. They're more, I think it was restaurant or
Yeah.
things like that.
yeah,
so we do have, we put in provisions to encourage adaptive reuse. So for instance, had your
Right.
Other building in
Right.
the village been in
Yeah.
the town,
Yeah.
there would have been some leeway to do other things with the
Right.
building through that process.
Right.
But so as we talk about how this is restored,
Yeah.
and from what you say, it really sounds like, you're not doing all the buildings at once, but as a planning board, we look at this and we say, well, it was vacated. If you're improving it, it still can't be used as a 2-family without possibly a variance. Or you come in for some special zoning that would make sense for this property.
And then, again, you just hit on my exact point. And the point is, I came before this board, and my permits are merely for putting a roof on that building, putting a wall on that building. It doesn't address the interior, which will require an additional permit with Ben to what I can and cannot do with it.
So that's where I think what you can and can't do with it and restoring it is something that we have to kind of address with Ben, because you're restoring it to something that's not potentially allowed. And you're in a gray fuzzy area. I don't know the answer. I
No,
kind
I
of
get
leave
that.
that to Ashley
Yeah.
and to Ben and to Sean to kind of advise on, for sure.
Right, as whether it can be used as a multifamily or single family, I get that. That's my third stage. If I don't fix these walls, I won't have a third stage. It's merely, if you were to say, hey, Tim, you know what, we got enough information, Ben, issue the permits. If you look at the permits, it only gives me two things to do, the siding and the roof. That's it. Nothing else is covered by it. So that then gives me the ability to come back to you, because Ben and I have had conversations about this, but we don't know what to do with it. I don't know if I want 20 units on that property that are year-round anyway, because like I said, when you get to the lower field, you got an open field with grass. Do I want to start running blacktop through it? Does it make financial responsibility for us?
So these are all those units that are on the lower end or the lower
Yeah,
field,
this
you
is the
said?
next one that can be fixed because it's in very good shape internally, but it's got 2 units to it. Now, I'm not worried about if it's a year-round one-bedroom, a single or two family. I mean, they're small units, don't get me wrong. I've even thought that maybe they're better off if we just use them as a single family, just because families are a little bigger, but these buildings aren't big. These units are, as we spoke earlier, 400 square feet. But that, when the board is considering about the current matter before you, I just ask you to focus on, we want to fix the walls, we want to put a roof on, then we can stipulate, I'm going to come back for everything else beyond that, because it's going to have to come back before you. There's no questions about it.
We have to be careful. So, I mean, it can't get so advanced that you almost have like vesting in it because we allowed you to go up to a certain point. I don't know if that can happen. And it's a legal question. But to secure it, to put a roof on it, to make sure there's not stuff coming in. But right now, again, we're taking...
That's all we're doing.
Yeah. I mean,
nothing more, nothing less.
It sounds like there were 4 or 5 that have been there, that were used already year-round by the family.
Correct, and Ben
you're
is aware of
upgrading
that.
those, and that's all within the purview of like pre-existing, non-conforming.
Right.
Anything else is a big question mark. And so when
Right.
it's in front of us, we're kind of like, all right, we're looking at this, but we're also saying, well, this was a seasonal bungalow community. It hadn't been used. And so it just begs the question for us. It's like we can't help it.
But no, I get that. And that's why when I put my permit into Ben, I didn't put the issue in before him about the use. It's just securing the building, having people there. We just recently did an Easter hunt there. We had 300 people there. They loved it. It was a good thing for the village to see. So as I was saying, the focus I have right now with this board is, and the question before you, can I go forward and put a new roof and fix the siding on this house? You're not giving me any other authorization. You could even restrict, I presume, by your own decision that no further work should be done in terms of decision of the use of the building until the building inspector makes the decision. And then upon his decision would question whether it comes back to you or not. If he says it's a single-family use building and I'm going to allow year-round, I don't know if he has to or he just has to pass it by you. Whatever he's got to do, I don't care.
You find any old photos of the buildings?
Oh,
So
yeah.
can you supply those or give us copies? Because that then gets to what we're reviewing specifically, which is if we're talking about walls and siding and roofs, it'd be useful to know what it was historically and how
if
we
you-
can,
yeah, if you don't mind seeing people's lives that live there, they've been sending it to me on the internet.
Yeah,
saying,
no, I
hey,
think
look,
that'd
this
be
is
great.
the house I was in, and look at the house, what it was.
Yeah, because I think that's, our whole role right now is the historic nature of it. And since Jim said it's architectural, we probably need the old photos to know what it was.
Right.
And I don't know how far back they go, but
Did they
it
go
would be
back
useful
20,
for
30
us.
years?
Yeah,
That's about it.
okay, yeah.
Maybe
Not that
40?
far,
In
yeah.
the 70s.
You might find, I wonder if you could find old postcards or old,
I tried, and
Yeah.
Jim's been looking. That's part of the reason why, because back in the day, as you know, they didn't use numbers for you to know where a property was. They use owner names.
was it? Now, you've been calling it Summercrest, but it's also been referred to as Pinecrest. What was the original?
The reason we've referred it to Summercrest is because if you look at the tax card, it refers to 24 Summercrest Lane,
Okay,
Monroe. We didn't know is that they changed the streets on names on that property numerous times. So the trace is hard.
try for 911.
So when we learned that the property was known as Pinecrest Bungalow Colony, we have now promoted, the owner is Summercrest LLC,
Okay.
and the property designation historically has always been Pinecrest Bungalow Colony,
Okay,
and now we call the lake Pinecrest Lake.
okay. Are you Ms. Lee?
Yes, that's,
Okay.
oh, I'm sorry, that's
Yeah,
Pam
because your
Lilly.
name is on the paperwork, so I was curious since you're here.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. No,
Pam,
no
meet
worries.
Bonnie, meet Pam.
Meet the board. All right. So, yeah, I think any background as far as some older pictures, anything, again, that speaks to the historic nature so we can then evaluate the proposed materials would be useful.
Now, just so you know, the pictures I have are limited, but I'll give you what I do have.
Yeah, just some photocopies. And
yeah.
even if you scan them digitally, Noreen can send the digital
Well, I
copies to us.
can actually attach them in an email, and
Okay.
if that's okay with the
Yeah.
board.
If you send it to Noreen, then Noreen will circulate
Then
it
she can
to us.
distribute.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, not a problem.
So I think this, from my perspective, I appreciate the discussion because it helps me understand the nature of this. Now I'm just very curious about the whole history of Pinecrest in general.
Not as easy as Rest Haven was.
Back to you.
So, a couple of more things just in perfecting the application package, because that ultimately is what's going to give us the ability to move forward as well. On the disclosure pursuant to Section 809 of the General Municipal Law, page 2, 5D, it lists that Pamela is the managing member, so I get that, but it should also list the entity, Summercrest LLC, as part of that answer.
On disclosure, the third page?
Nope,
The
page
third
2.
Okay, all right. The reason I did that, and just so you know, because I was the culprit that made that, is that we listed the partners and Hudson River Renovation because that's the entity I use to do the renovations with. I didn't, Summercrest LLC is the actual deed owner of the property, so I just assumed with the application being the applicant is Summercrest that satisfied that, but I can change that.
Yeah, just, that question in particular wants to both find out the nature of the office that Pamela holds and the name of the entity, which would be, of course, Summercrest. On the short EAF,
Hold on, I'm just correcting this one
Yep.
problem
No,
that you mentioned. What page now?
on the short EAF, the environmental assessment form,
Let me go to that.
It was in part one of your,
I just
That
didn't
helps.
attach it to this particular package, and I'm trying to see where I put it. For, have an extra copy by chance?
no, the
I didn't bring it
the
upstairs.
EAF. I'm up to the EAF.
Okay, what would, oh, okay.
So this
That's the 809, right? I have that in front of me. What I don't have is a seeker. And go to the third page of that, that's where it does not list Summercrest with the names.
Yeah,
There's this,
we'll start on page 1. So right from the top, it lists Summercrest as the sponsor, and the name of the project is Pinecrest Bungalow Colony. That makes sense to me. As far as project location, again, it lists Pinecrest Bungalow Colony. I think it's asking for a description or attach a map location. I think it should be the address of the property there.
I could just add to that, one of Sean's comments was about using the DEC EAF mapper. So if you go on the DEC website, you actually could go and select your parcel by SBL, and then it auto-generates some of the numbers, some of the answers to some of the questions for you. So, for example, wetlands, it would trigger that those are present on the site, and that then also will give you a little map at the end that would show the location.
well, you mean that shows you the wetlands and everything?
This is the
It'll
EAF
show
mapper.
you the property, but it'll auto-generate some of those questions on the EAF
Okay.
about
Oh, okay.
wetlands based on the DEC database.
Okay, I'll have to find that.
Off of Lakes Road,
Yes.
between,
We're just after Center Hill. Before Round Lake coming out of the village. You'll see it has like a little odd circle to it on the property.
Yeah,
After Center Hill.
keep going.
You go the other way.
Or northeast.
south or north?
No, north.
Keep going.
No, here you
Yeah,
are.
there you
You're
go.
right here. So what you do is, it says select tax parcel, but if you have 2 tax parcels, you would draw the project site. But I'll give you an example. So if you select the tax parcel, it's going to select that one.
That's the property.
I'll just do full. So you wait for it to generate, and what will happen is the application will automatically generate an EAF,
Okay.
and it auto-populates certain answers.
Okay, I just
So-
answered them as I knew them based on Peter's,
Yeah, New York State DEC had created this whole platform, and it's their policy that when someone submits an EAF, they want this utilized.
Middle of the page, on page 1, name of applicant or sponsor, you have HRR Corp. And the contact information.
well,
and the
we're
address
doing the
for that.
work. We're doing all the work, that's why. HR
So
Corp
would
is,
that be,
Well, I think it would be Summercrest because it's the applicant for the actual project.
okay,
before
page
you,
1,
so-
what line?
a name of applicant or sponsor? It's under after you get to brief description of proposed action, the next section, you have HRR Corp listed and the address for HRR Corp, which is your High Street address, and I assume the telephone number for that, but that should really be Summercrest information.
As a sponsor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then, that's all I had on the EAF. On the entity disclosure form.
Yep.
You have that handy? No, I don't
Next
think you
page.
did. No. Next. Section A, it should list in the open box the project name and address, so Pinecrest Bungalow Colony, and again, the address there.
Which one is this again?
This is the entity disclosure form.
Entity disclosure, okay, that, I have that
So
here.
that's on page 1. You want to complete that empty box. And on page 2,
Section A there, it's that you have the name of the entity, and the box then to the right of that says project name and address.
Yeah. What do you want in there?
Pinecrest Bungalow, and the address for that, again, would be appropriate in that box. And as for purposes of this disclosure form, for Summercrest, you have the P.O. box. It should be a physical address.
Well, that's for mailing purposes.
I think you need in the box that's blank, you would need the name, you would need the address of the.
Project.
The project, but I think
The P.O. box is acceptable for entity address for Summercrest?
if that's their, designated corporate or LLC
If that's their
address.
LLC.
Right, yeah, that's where all, trust me, it's where all the books are done. All the money spent.
And on the second page where it lists the various owners, Pamela James, both Tims, and it lists Hudson River Renovation, which I assume is HRR Corp.
Same corporation, same
Right.
operation.
Ashley, shouldn't we have an additional entity disclosure form for HRR Corp if part of the ownership of Summercrest LLC
No.
is a corporation?
No, no. They're two separate corporations. The reason I listed them is because when I read the Part B,
Okay.
it seems to refer to everybody that's involved in the transaction, including the GC. So the GC is Hudson River Renovation / HRR Corp., so we provided it. That's me. So if you want that eliminated, I can eliminate. It has no financial interest other than the work. It has no ownership in the LLC.
So Section B is getting at who the members of the of Summercrest LLC are.
Oh, okay.
So if Pamela's the 100% member, then the form should be revised to just list Pamela. If there's multiple members in the LLC, like if there's managing members and then
Correct.
other members?
The James R. Manuel, Timothy Babcock, and Miss Lee are the members.
Okay.
Miss Lee is a 75% owner, controlling operator.
Managing member, right.
Managing member.
Right, so then Hudson River Renovation and yourself,
Don't need to
since
be
you don't
there.
have an ownership interest in the LLC.
Correct.
Should come off of that. That should be revised.
Not a problem.
I want to touch upon, before we move on, because we talked about EAF, before we have you start making changes to the EAF, is this subject to seeker?
So that turns on, I guess, what is
The action.
the action. So we talked a little bit earlier about segmentation, and since it's this kind of phased approach,
Right.
what the appropriate classification might be. So if there's going to be, future phases, potentially changes of use, that might change the classification. If it's just strictly repairs, maintenance, that would be a type 2. So that's a good point, then you wouldn't need to.
I think we have to figure out how we're dealing with seeker overall, and if this is just a stopgap until you figure out what you're doing, and if that's permissible segmentation.
And then she's right, it's strictly repairs. I'll use a loose term, repairs, that's all it is. It's the buildings within the footprint of the buildings. There's nothing near the water, nothing within 100 feet of the water. I know the Army Corps of Engineers has jurisdiction on some of it, it's 0 feet, but I know the town of Monroe has 100 feet. Nothing is within that distance that creates, and all we're doing is cleaning up what's there. It's not that we're building, adding, or extending, because Ben has already told me I can't build, add, or extend. It's a non-conforming use already, but I can repair and preserve.
Right, well, it's not only non-conforming, it was vacated. So,
Part of it was, yes.
right, your 4 buildings or whatever has been occupied.
Correct.
That's pre-existing, it sounds like it's pre-existing, non-conforming, and it's occupied. But everything else, if it's been vacated over a certain time period, that use is gone, I believe.
I'd have to look at, and it would be, of course, a question for the building inspector, but whether the non-conforming use is, building specific. If a specific building's vacated, then does it abandon that use? Typically, it's a year, I believe, most codes that you're vacant for.
So I don't question reuse of the ones that are in use.
Right.
It's what you can or can't do, even if you secure them, without going even beyond us, in case there's use variances.
Yeah, my understanding in speaking with Ben in general, he believes they can be reused for seasonal. The issue whether or not I can be using them for year-round.
So that's where we're talking about the vacant?
Well, I'm saying that's, the vacant units.
So if it's been vacated for over a year, let's say
Yeah.
that's the number, and that zoning district, if it doesn't allow seasonal bungalows, you can't restart it.
Again, I'm not sure, and
Right.
Ben's comment to me is the year-round of the year-rounds,
Right.
the other ones can be reestablished as seasonal. That was his comment to me. But then again, like you said, and like the board is knowledgeable about, we're all dealing with the historical aspect of it for the first time, which allows additional uses on pre-existing buildings.
Well, for the historical aspect is just we're approving, again, these stopgap measures to allow them to not go into further disrepair.
Right, correct.
But we're not approving any use or any.
Correct.
Or,
I'm not even-
we're not actually, and we wouldn't endorse use because we think first, I don't know that we agree they can be reused for seasonal. I think to restart that, it may require more, but that's a separate discussion.
And I agree, and that's why I'm before you about strictly this, as you referred to, maybe it's a good term, it's a stopgap. Give me the permission to fix them. Beyond that, I mean, listen, there's definitely a year's worth of work there. So, you know, and to be able to come back to you, even if I had to come back to you for use, you're going to be asking me all sorts of questions. What about the plumbing? What about the electric? What about the gas? What about the sewer? You're going to have a lot more questions from me that are plans that are in between the two.
Well, and that's where, so again, wearing our planning hat beyond historic, which
Right.
is our historic hat, if you're putting in electricity and gas or any other utilities that are going to service buildings that haven't been occupied, it kind of begs, you need to figure out what you're doing because you wouldn't be putting it in unless you were going to use them.
And going back to my conversation with Ben, which I've had a lot of conversations with him, as you can
Yeah,
imagine.
we don't have the benefit all of those, so I
Yeah,
appreciate
no,
it.
and I get that. Is they can, as far as he's concerned, he would allow them to be used as seasonal, as far as he's concerned. And that anything else, he said, I will have to go back to the planning board to do.
There is a specific provision, if you look at 5762, that talks about summer cottage developments, so, and use of, you know, the property. I think it would still, also the question, of course, of abandonment would still be relevant, but it appears there might be some broader.
And like, yeah, and I cannot emphasize enough that we want to focus on getting the buildings to a stopgap, as you put it. Everything beyond that will become questionable over time. And I promise you, Bonnie, I will be back before you.
Yeah, because I look at
Well,
5761, and it says, a nonconforming use shall be deemed to have been abandoned. And so then it gets into that too. So, yeah, to me, you have to look at 62 in connection with 61. Because one says that it may be continued, but then it says any use would be abandoned if it's not used for a time period of 12 consecutive months. Ultimately, it's in your best interests to just, you know, go the route that is proper and wherever that route takes us.
Yeah.
So if you want to go year-round, that might be one route. If you want to do seasonal, I think that may still require you to go possibly to the ZBA or to us, and I would do it cohesively and comprehensively, because honestly, it's going to be more of a pain in the neck to piecemeal it than to just say,
Right,
this is what
right.
we want to do.
And once I'm past this stage of just getting the walls and the building, the roof together, then I don't have to piecemeal it anymore. Right now, I think it needs a piecemealing because of the conditions of the building. And according to your rules, you're allowed to give a pass for this type of work to be done without much effort being done, because you know the building inspector is going to require me to repair them to code as far as the structure goes. And we're not talking about anything inside, and has nothing to do with the uses whatsoever. This is not about the use. This is strictly about preserving, so when people go on that property, they're safe and they get to see what the old bungalow colony used to look like. What we come to uses down the road, that's a secondary to me. I have to have buildings to rent. If I can't have, whether it's seasonal or rental, if I don't have them, I have nothing.
No, there's no point in
Right,
having the
right.
property if you can't
Yeah.
use them.
Yeah, and that's the emergency. In my opinion, that's the emergency. I don't want to go. I got 15 buildings to go, and I don't want to go into next winter with these buildings still exposed the way they are. I think they've done enough agony. And the one building that was pointed out, I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I'm concerned.
We may ask for an interpretation from Ben, because you're saying and representing that he said that the seasonal part of it can continue. And I think it would be useful just to get out and in front of this,
Right.
you know, what you are and aren't allowed to do.
Well, and again, that becomes,
Because and I'm only saying that
Yeah.
because if you were just putting, roofs and fixing the walls, that'd be one thing. But I think the fact you're putting utilities in, that's an anticipation of more,
Let me qualify that. We're not that we're putting utilities in, we're replacing and bringing them up to code. For instance, let me explain to you the electrical grid, or lack thereof. There is one transformer that sits in the roof, sits on the property that comes through the woods. Maybe one of your pictures may have caught it up. That's being removed. The utility services off that comes to 29. 29 feeds that building and all the buildings down below on one circuit. Amazing what you got away with years ago. So all the buildings have electric, all the buildings have plumbing, they have everything that there is. Even the rec hall has 2 bathrooms, it had a kitchen in there for the rec, and they had a washer and dryer in there, they had everything in there. All we're doing is bringing it up to code. All the replacements we're doing is to segregate out. So 29 feeds everything else. 25 has its own. 31 has its own. 41 has 2 different electrical systems, one in each side where you see the doors, but coming off the same meter. So what we're doing is we're not putting something in that's not there.
I totally,
Just so you know,
I
we're
totally
only replacing,
understand that. Yeah,
and we're spending a lot of money segregating.
Yeah, no, and I totally understand and appreciate that you're doing all this, but it then begs the question. All of these improvements are bringing the buildings that have been vacated into habitable use for what? And the for what is, Ben's position, let's say, is you're allowed to use it for seasonal dwellings. That seems to be his
The
position.
remaining buildings, yes.
Yeah, and I don't know that I agree with that.
Right.
So it may be good just to get, like I said, while we're going through this process,
Right.
to get this out, just to make sure that whatever you need to do what you want to do, it's clear what that path is. But I'll put that aside.
Yeah.
And then just continue on the historic.
That path is,
aspect
and that
of
path's a
this.
little difficult because, like I said, the number of buildings are going to be there. The numbers. I mean, I kind of like the seasonal in a way. I kind of even toyed with my head because I don't want to be down in the lower field in the
A lot
winter.
of people in the Hudson Valley are creating these, maybe not seasonal, they're year-round, but they're little resorts where you can still come up. They have Wildflower Farm up in like Gardner, up in the,
Right.
Shawangums. Blue Chip Farm is proposing. A lot of people are proposing these units that are intended to be for city dwellers coming up to hang out in what they consider to be the woods and to hang out, and have a recreation area and a pool and and go to the local restaurants, whatever. Yeah. So there may be that opportunity, but I think you're starting to do things to make them occupiable when they've been vacant. And
to secure
so that
them.
kind of, but
It's-
but it's a little beyond that. Securing them would be securing them, but this is also installing utilities. I know they were there, but bringing them up again. So we'll talk to Ben.
Right. Well,
but-
and also remember, those utilities I'm referring to are not being installed now. The buildings have to be secured. After that fact is when we approach Ben about what we can and cannot do too, because that becomes a factor.
Okay.
But you're right about where we're going. But again, without the buildings, I got nothing. I'm sitting here and I will go nowhere with this property. And I think this board would be sad to see something like this drop off the face of the earth. We're not looking to tear it out and put 40 units or 100 units or 2,000 units. Now, I don't know if you're aware, we're next door to the 45 acres that the town owns. We're also next to the that goes out to Monroe that they brought from all of mine. They're next to the property that runs behind the bus company. That's 116 acres of land that should stay preserved. The atmosphere, and that's another reason why I like the historical status to preserve, because now this board, when something comes before you on any land around it, you have to think about the preservation of this property. They told me that when they had found out that Rest Haven was what Rest Haven had, the cul-de-sac that backs up to our side, they said would never have happened. Not especially the way it was, because they want to preserve it. And that's another thing here, when you look at my purpose, is to preserve preserve. This is a wilderness area. We got bears, we got deers, we got babies, we got snakes, we got everything you want to think of. We'll even give you a hike into the woods if you want, safely.
And, you know, I'll stop and we can move on to the historic element of
Yeah.
this. I think it could be repurposed for lots of uses. you
I
know?
do agree that-
So it's just the path that you have to take.
Exactly, and
That's all,
that's-
that we have to figure out.
Right, exactly. And that's where the buildings come in first.
Yeah.
A couple of other things, just procedurally, it would require referral to the county, and also public hearing can be waived, so that's something that the board will have to discuss, but as you know, the GML takes some time, they have 30 days to respond, so
Now, when you say revert to the county, for which part? The last end part or the current part just to fix it?
Well, this application right now has to go to the county.
Does
So
require
something, the fact that you're in front of the board triggers the GML review, which is, so that'll give us an opportunity to go out and look at the site if we want to just walk it and see what's going on. Was the lake a lake or is it a wetland at this point?
No, it's a lake.
So it's still a
We
lake?
have a map of the property from 1900, I think, and then we have it from 1930, and all of a sudden, poof, this lake is there.
Yeah, no,
It's a man-made lake. It's 2
Yeah.
acres, about deepest point's about 13 feet. And my understanding, according to some of the old venturists that used to go there every summer, there's fish in there.
Okay.
So if you want to go fishing, gentlemen, I haven't done it in years, but it's
Yeah.
there.
Something you referenced early on in your presentation was the barn on the property. What are your plans for that building?
The plans with that is simple. I've already spoken with New York State, and it is going to be going up to New York State. They have a special section for barn and for preservation of the barn, and that's the intent, is that piece of building is definitely going up there. We had to engage a engineer, which was Bart Rod that I referred to. I expect those plans back any day now, and what we're doing is just securing it, and it's going to be used basically as storage. All the homes that are currently occupied have water softeners in them. We store salt on the property for the tenants to use. We pay for the salt because it's our equipment. We had Rourke drill well there. He drilled out 2 wells already. When I say drilled out, he rehabbed the existing. Nothing is being new. Everything is existing, and we're just cleaning everything up, cleaning it out. So when you drive in there, it's a very nice property. Question is, do I want to run blacktop through it or not, or keep the dirt roads?
I'd like to pass around to the rest of the board for their questions and comments. Lou, can we start with you? Anything?
No, I have no comments.
Dylan?
I do, but I'd like a little time to recap just for myself.
Sure.
But I commend your opening remarks. I think what you started with answered a lot of questions. Just need to formally answer some of the consultants' questions in writing for the record. And we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Pat?
Yes, this project gives me a little bit of PTSD because I had to restore a 150-year-old home. By the way, I really appreciate what you did with Rest Haven, and I think that gives you substantial credibility with us. Obviously, we're interested in preserving the nature of Monroe, and which is all in the comprehensive plan here, that I'm sure you've read. So I hope that, this could happen. I'm totally, as I understand it right now, I'm totally behind it, but I would be concerned that you wouldn't waste any money, if there are issues with, because the property hasn't been, or some of the units have not been occupied for over a year. We need to answer that question so you'll know financially what that might gain for you. That might I'm just thinking of all the work that needs to be done on these things, like for insulation, you have 2x4s there, right? So you can't put in rolled insulation there, you have to have it come out. I had that problem with our house, we totally gutted it, and, this is a house that went back to, well, the first deed was 1845, so.
Old deed.
Yeah, indeed. So, we had to lengthen, we did put in fiberglass rolled insulation, but we had to extend the 2x4s, I forget how many inches to do that, but everything was like that. There's just, so, and we worked with Ben, and also Ben's predecessor, I forget his name.
Bill?
Montoya?
Bill?
Roy?
Bill.
Bill, yeah.
Yeah, I dealt with him too before he left.
Yeah. So I wish you luck
Thank
with
you.
this, and I hope it happens. That's all I have.
Bonnie, further questions, comments?
No, but I want to point something out to you that you may not be aware of. This is Netter Online.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you've ever been to this site. So it's netronline.com.
NETR?
Yep, online.com. One of the fun things about this is that it has, it shows you historic aerials, although, of course, they put this across it so you won't make copies of them. But one of the fun things is you can do a comparison, and you could do a slider where if you do this, you could see what was there.
Nice
Isn't
to
that
know.
amazing?
I was going to go up to Orange County through all the maps too.
Yeah, so this is just because I'm a historic geek. It just allows you to see, you can do a comparison. So on this side, you could put the aerial in that's, let's say, more current, 2019. And so you can go back and forth and see what was.
Now, is that my property?
So that's your property.
The lake looks familiar.
Well, so see this little in here in this lake?
Yeah, that lake we own part of too, the top one. That feeds the mill pond.
Right, so you could see they're still there. That one looks like it's been a little bit more, it's got a little bit more algae and other things that, sediment over time. But what's also interesting is this one, it looks like it had kind of a shore, and this one, you can't quite make it out in this because
It
it's
had
copyrights
it
over
had a dock.
like a dock on it, yeah. So this is always a fun resource I like to
Okay.
point out to people if they're looking for, you can also see what might have been fields on the property, what's overgrown versus what was fields at the time.
Right.
So that's it. I think, pretty much had my comments.
All right, anything else that we can answer for you tonight, then?
No, I just want to say in closing, first of all, I can't take all the credit, even though I did all the talking, and most people know I'm not easy to shut up. Pam's been trying it for 24 years. But I got to give her credit. Every time I said, let's do it, she said no. I can't get divorced because we're not married, but she can, But I got to give her credit too, because she's dealt through a lot of this ups and downs. We're aware of the issues with the insulation, and that was my earlier comment about the double wall, but that's not a concern of ours, because Ben said as it sits today, even with new electric and plumbing, I could use it as he would allow it to be used as seasonal. So some of those questions don't come into play, but again, we've got a lot of money invested in it. We're big boys. What we're doing, we've got a local bank, I won't say who it is, who is going to, we're using hard money, rehab money, that is going to take the loan out, so the loan will be borrowed locally, not outside of the community. So I appreciate the concern you have and everything, and I think the big step here is, if I can get, like on some of the documents, the seeker I didn't have today, do we still need the seeker? Or do you want it for the next time I'm here?
I think let us, talk to Ben.
It's going to be required for the county referral.
Yeah, so we'll have to know whether it's a type 2 or not for the county referral, but then we have to.
Well, if it's, Is the county referral still required if it's just repairing the buildings
Yeah.
and no use?
Yeah, that, it's
Okay.
different, it's different from the actual seeker process.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it's an
Yeah.
authorization, a land use authorization, since it requires this approval from this board, or
Okay.
the certificate of appropriateness, as it's called, so that's what would trigger that, because you're within 500 feet of the county road and also the village boundary, I believe.
We're over 500 feet from the county road, according to Orange and Rock.
Your parcel's front on it.
Huh?
Your parcel's front on the campus.
3-3-15.2 does, but that does not contain these buildings.
It's listed on the application.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. You're right, it
Both
does.
are.
The front corner does, the front end corner. I'm used to everything, congested there.
It's an interesting, yeah, shaped property.
Isn't it? You can't figure, it actually used to be part of Brook Farms here in Monroe. That's what it used to be. And the eye doctor or dentist on the corner of Center Hill was their office.
It used to be part of Brook Farms, you
It used to
said?
be part of Brook Farms.
Okay.
And Dr., I can't think of his name, but he was a dentist in the area, owned it prior to
Bundred.
19... Huh?
Bundred,
Is that who it was?
yeah, Dr. Bundred.
Yeah, he owned that
My
property
former
prior
dentist.
to. And then it backs up to the mines that are on the property next door that the town now owns, the 45 acres. There's mines in there. And it backs up to all of that. So we haven't gotten the exact history on it yet, but we're on the tip of it.
I have a question about the utility portion, just real quick.
Yeah.
Would you not need the building use occupancy to designate code, which exact code and regulation you would need to design to?
For sure, but I'm not an expert in the building code, but I don't know if a seasonal versus single-family dwelling
Okay.
year-round would designate a difference in electrical.
And you just ran the utility supply to the property, not to any of the bungalows yet? Electrical and cable?
No, yeah. Let me to explain that a little better. As I said in my opening comment, the transformer currently existing in the woods they've been there 4 times, 5 times since we bought the property. Trees are falling on it. They recommended pulling it out of the woods. So what they did is they created our own. And yeah, I should maybe explain that one for you a little more. They created our own line of service coming into the property. The property will consist of 4 transformers, which will be strategically placed on the property, one up behind 25, one at the S-turn, where 33 and 35 are in this right side, one down in front of 41, and then one down in front of 47. Those are where the transformer feed lines are going. The reason being is that was at Orange and Rockland's really request. They said they've asked years ago to correct this problem, but the prior owner didn't want to, because the problem is once they come onto the property, and that's why the riser stops where it is, I take responsibility. They require everything I do, but I have to take responsibility if there's a problem. And it became a security issue with all forest fires and everything, and the big one we had out in South Blooming Grove. Quite frankly, that they're the controlling industry. I can't go to them and say, no, you can't do it. They have the authority, but that's a good question, and that's how we're resolving the problem, by putting it underground and dedicating all brand new stuff. Now, to add on to that, we're hoping to do is that the meters are going to be banked, I guess the correct term it is. And every meter behind it, every banked set of meters is going to have a gas generator behind that. So the property is going to be fully secured because, you're back on 20 acres. And the guys coming up from the city love it. They're dark, they see nothing, they love it. But when the power goes out, I guarantee you they'll be screaming up a storm. So just to explain that, and that's why Orange and Rockland wanted it done, so I took advantage right now of putting gas on it and getting rid of any oil and propane on the property to give it more security.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have one further question.
Sure.
The box in that one house that fed all the other houses, what size was that? Was it like a 250 or?
Well, I don't know what it is, but because I never thought of looking at it. But all the houses that are connected to it are not on. We've disconnected the electricity from them for security reasons until I can get in it. But I couldn't answer that question. I didn't go that far. It was just crazy to imagine they used one electrical line for.
Point of interest. Electric to
Yeah, it is. And what's going to happen is once they're completed with the underground, all aerial is being removed from the property. Nothing will be up on the property anymore that's aerial once you get to the top, actually it's where the barn is.
That's why I asked, because I wouldn't know how they would size those transformers if,
Well, they're
There was
now
no
using 4
information.
transformers for the property, not 1. Right now, they're using 1.
yeah, but how would you size the transformers without knowing the property use?
I understand now what you're talking about. What the electrician did is that if everything had electricity to it based on the building being there, what do we need to service the property? And Orange and Rockland made that decision because the pre-existing situation was they did have electricity serving all these buildings that really, even I would never have done that. And that's why we're spending so much more money trying to get I think it's a value added. It's a safety value, the life value, and I honestly think it's an attraction to some people when they come in, they see you put all this money into the property, you end up with good tenants. I mean, 20 years of this, and we've had maybe 6 evictions we had to do, and we never once had to have the sheriff show up to finish the eviction. So, Sergio, we've been there since 2003, and we've acquired.
Okay.
Then we've got this property we just got in February. We got property over in Highland Falls. We got some rentals down in Nanuet, and we have one down in Virginia Beach. So we're well versed in.
And when you talked about tenants, I thought you were talking about this property. I was like, wait a minute.
Oh,
it
this
wasn't been-
property too. This property too. I mean, I got to worry about the old lady that's there, and they've been there almost 15 years, maybe longer. I got a tenant in Rockland that's been 20 years since she got her divorce. I don't know why they stay with me, but they do.
I have a
Thank you.
question.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, how many units do you think will be able to salvage in this project?
Whether you call it seasonal or year-round, which I understand, and I know what I'm doing in terms of what I'm investing in over time, but I find the investment more important than anything. I'd like to see every single building up, but again, I'm playing with the idea, maybe I'm better off putting all the units up on the top, make them year-round and everything else down below seasonal. Or someone mentioned B&B to me, but the problem with B&B is that B&Bs, you're only, according to what Ben says, you're only allowed 1 per property. So,
And then I think you have to live on the property as well if it's a B&B. So if you don't.
yeah,
And it's not that you can't apply for these uses, but it means you have to go to other boards and there's no certainty whether you can get it. The only thing that's certain for the property is single-family dwellings. And beyond that, the only thing for certain on that property is what's ever allowed in that zoning district. And we know single-family dwellings are. Beyond that, again, it's a big question mark, what is and what isn't allowed.
and like I said too, earlier, and I agree with you on that, Bonnie, is that these are 400 square units. You got 2 units next to each other, 400 each. Maybe just forgive and forget and say, okay, they're going to all be single-family homes. Doesn't bother me. It actually maybe makes it better for the equation, even if it had to come back before this board to say, well, instead of having 40 rentals, now you only have 20 rentals on the property. That is endearing to be a good thought about doing on the property.
All right, thank you very much for your time and all your information tonight. We're going to continue to review this project. We look forward to the rest of your submission and reviewing the other information for the rest of us on the board that you've already provided.
Okay. And will the board provide me a list of other things they want, or what we spoke about tonight, or just based on my notes?
I think you have.
Just so we're inclusive.
And Noreen, maybe we could put a draft together once the minutes are drafted, so we can just come up with a laundry list of what we have said. And you have the engineer's comments as well.
Right, yeah. Is
Yeah.
that the consultant?
Yes, that's our
Okay.
engineering consultant, yes.
They didn't refer to you as engineer before. Okay, yeah, I saw them. I think I answered most of them, but you just want them in writing for the board.
For the record, yeah.
Yeah, for the record,
Yeah,
that's
or
fine.
any other submissions, we talked about the photos and some other stuff that would help us in architectural evaluation.
And I think once you take a visit to the property, it might actually clear up a lot of thoughts that you have. And the sooner the better that you can come, because, personally, I'd
I
like
look
to.
forward to it. It'll be fun to go out there.
Yeah,
See what you
nobody will
have.
find you, I promise you. It's like when they go to Rest Haven, I said, if you get lost, don't call me. They looked at me, why? I said, because there's no frequency in this building. When you can't call and say, I'm lost. They lost a dog in that house years ago.
Have a cell tower soon enough.
What's that?
We're going to have a cell tower soon enough,
Yeah,
so.
yep. So, all right, well, I appreciate your time. I look forward to getting that list, and then I'll submit it to you. Is there any reason or will I be notified if you think I should be back on the 20th, or this be no need for it at this point?
No, I think it would probably be, not this month, it would be next month for the next month's meeting. 'Cause
Workshop?
Yeah, we have to still go to the county, so.
Oh, okay.
We know we have to do that, and that's 30 days, so.
So get that out of the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, folks. I appreciate everybody's evening. I'm sorry you kept you here for 2 hours, but shouldn't have let me talk.
I'll let you
Thank
know.
you.
Thank you.
She's ready to go. Thank you. Have a good evening, everybody.
Tim, anything that you need to submit to the board from your questions or anything tonight has to be turned in by June 29th at noon. June 29th. Right. And any submissions that come in as plans from now on? Any plans that get submitted? Engineer folded, not rolled, please. Engineer folded, not rolled. I let it go this time, it was only 2 pages. But I'm not doing it again. Bob,
As one of its
can you come up?
treasures in Monroe, and it cuts them down like hidden treasures.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Night.
Night. Bob.
Tracy. I know you joined us this evening. Anything that you needed to share with us tonight? Please join us. Thank you.
I thought I saw Meadow Hill, and then I didn't see them here, so that's not happening tonight. I actually had come to also hear about update on Henry Farms. So listening, from the background, it's frustrating for the public because trying to follow along with this stipulation agreement and what you can and cannot demand as an end result of the project. And the comments tonight, he wanted to remove sections about some wording about modifications. And the deputy chairman, I asked
Thank
him a
you.
very good question about if he thought his plans were more effective, more impactful to the wetlands, and he didn't answer that because if you look at the map, I don't understand how these things get done in court. He put houses where there were none before in wetlands. So for him to say that this was all, this was agreed on and this is, the good plan, that was not what was approved, or reviewed before. The townhouses were not in those wetlands. So it gets really hard to not say anything, so I appreciate you just letting me vent for a moment about that. But I did want to know how that works, this document you guys are all working out. Is that something that's available to the public before you approve it or make some sort of resolution? Like, there's no public comment part of this whole process I can see, because this is something you're working out that's already been predetermined, right?
There'll be a public hearing ultimately if they proceed with the subdivision.
Will be
There'll
one?
be yeah.
Okay. But I know you had missed earlier in the meeting, I know there was comments about why they had concerns about that language and whether or not you guys agree to take it out or not, and them saying that they're open to minor changes when I don't understand, because if it's in a wetlands and the Army Corps or your own regulations say you can't be in there, that's going to be more of a minor change. So it's very confusing for me to understand how this is proceeding. And I don't know if there's any enlightenment that you could
Keep
give
in
me.
mind that the wetland boundary's likely going to change because they have to update their delineation, so that wetland boundary might not be accurate today. Correct, yep.
Well, and it's interesting, I've had one project where DEC has already said, based on the 7.5 or 7.4 acre that's going to be coming into play, that they've called some of them eligible. So I don't know how they're going to treat this project, and we should probably get in front of the issue, because I've also had applicants where they just go and say, well, this is already approved, so you have to endorse it. You know, I'd rather find out in advance and talk to DEC about that application. I think it'd be useful to find out what their policy position's going to be, because we have a couple of these older projects.
About that as well, because you've
Yeah.
updated, so that's going to come into play, and not just for this project, but for all projects.
And all I can say is, because I was somewhat involved when there was the discussions of the stipulation before it was agreed to, my recollection was that they were allowed 70 homes. They were allowed to work with those bulk requirements that they have, but not necessarily that we couldn't, based on having to do some seeker review again, consider alterations to that plan. So I think that, at least for me, is a sticking point, and perhaps, you know, I think at some point the planning board just has to have a position. And if it means that they have to somehow go back to court and rework the stipulation or get some additional clarity on that, then so be it. But I think we have to just finally decide what we think is reasonable in terms of that letter, which is supposed to be an agreement as to the level of future review.
I voted before you got here that they would take some of those us out, so I guess we'll talk on that one. But yes, I'm glad to hear that there'll be a process where the public can participate, because I know you've seen my letters. I've been following this project for 20 years. My group, this is one of the ones that sparked having a group in the first place, because we felt that there was. I don't like to talk badly about your predecessors, right? But they definitely rushed that conditional approval, and so here we are today, basing it on decisions that may or may not have had the best information at the time.
So just so everybody knows, Tracy Hsu has worked for a long time on these projects that are sort of Chester, Monroe area projects for Preservation Collective. So if you see that term or that group, Preservation Collective, Tracy represents them.
A letter when I first heard this all came back, because ironically, you know, it's 20 years of this and 20 years of us. So, you know, it's weird that it's happening now. But I dug all my files out because I had to think about it for a long time, and we had a lot of issues with this on many levels, which I tried to, you know, I threw out a lot at you when this first came a couple months ago. When I first heard of it, I wish I had known that the town was in the middle of doing this stipulation. I mean, we could have interjected, because we really don't know that they. What it is. So now I missed the last few meetings, so that's why I was kind of trying to catch up what I've missed in documents wise. So if there's things I can foil for, or when they're ready to be foiled for, I want to stay up. The group wants to stay abreast of what's happening and how this proceeds. So I'll be in touch, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so with that, members that we have,
October 8th, Bonnie, Jeff, Pat, Luis, and Robert were here.
So I don't have the Word version of that.
Oh,
Yeah, so I don't have October 18th. I don't think I have. Good night. I don't have October 18th or February 21st. Oh, so we did it already?
haven't approved.
Okay, so we made the edits. Good
I
night,
made all
guys.
the edits that you sent me.
All right, so who
We
was
just
on that
said-
one?
Jeff, Pat, Dylan, Luis, and Nick. February 24th.
First. Advised.
Oh, so when we were going to take it up, I think you accidentally, at least that initial time, sent the agenda.
That
Remember, there was
October
one
I
by,
kept- October I sent you the agenda on. I guess I don't want to finish those. No, February 21st was the first big red line one that you sent me. I corrected it and sent it back. I don't remember
I
what
have
the
this
date
one
was.
from 3/21.
Ooh.
Did I mark this? All right, so I'll just scroll through this, know that there's been edits to it already. So we dealt with Henry Farms, Homeland Towers, DG Management, Mountain View Shul, Golden Delight, Sherry Torah, J Squared, Pilati Village. God, that was a big agenda.
Oh, yeah, we had 8 projects that night.
That's probably why I decided not to come.
Thanks,
All right,
boss.
so we have, do we have enough? We
Yes.
have, okay, so I'll abstain because I wasn't at the meeting.
Read them a new.
Well,
All right,
I
so,
guess I have to abstain.
so I'll make a motion that we accept the corrected minutes for February 21st, 2023. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Pat. Noreen? Or, is this an-
Sure.
thank you.
Aye.
Jeff Manson,
Aye.
Bonnie Francis,
Aye.
Shay,
I edited them, so you're right.
I too.
Dylan Penn,
Aye.
Thank you.
All right.
Bonnie, Jeff, Pat, and Robert Garstack was the next one. Yeah. 1, 2, 3.
So I made edits. I just want to scroll through it because there was a couple of them I had questions. No, I'm going to give these to you. No, I'll tell you if there's one. Like there's one where I thought it almost seemed like there's a resolution. Okay. So this was on, let's see, that new project, 17M, Executive Office. And also, if we could just get page numbers on the bottom of them, Noreen? No, there aren't. You have them?
Right here,
Why do I not have them? Oh, you're looking at the,
Word docs one.
this is the Word version you gave me,
Oh, well,
because that's the one I mark up.
I don't get the page.
So, Ms. Torrey, related to this, I thought there would be reference on the deed that was submitted, but it wasn't completed, so that would need to be submitted also. There's a parcel, Cuomo de Paula subdivision map. This is a subdivision map 732 showing, and then there was nothing. Okay. We adopted the neg deck for Pilati. So, is everybody okay to adopt these with the revisions? As I said, they're mostly typographical or formatting.
I'm okay with it.
Okay, may I have a motion to accept the minutes as revised for March 9th, 2023?
So moved.
Thank you, Pat. May I have a second?
Second. Fun.
Lisa Rivera.
Welcome aboard.
Jeff Manson.
Aye.
Bonnie Franson.
Aye.
Pat Shea.
Aye.
Dylan Penn. Bob, if you don't want the hard copy, you don't have to take it. I forgot you do just paper. I mean, PDF.
So this was Homeland
Hard copy, you don't have-
Towers. We took some comments from the community and the public. Again, I think mostly typos here. Then we had Monroe Commons and the submission, and we got the consultant reviews back. Mr. Richmond was there. Harry Torah. And we approved it. And BJ's, I think this was one of the amendments. Are we good to approve this one?
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes for March 21st, 2023, again with as revised. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Lou. Noreen?
Manson.
Aye.
Aye.
Bonnie Franson. Pat Shea.
Aye.
Dylan Penn.
Aye.
Yes.
Let's see, this was Homeland Towers. No.
We'll be able to. We'll be back.
Yeah.
Okay, so leave this one. And then
18th is done. We did it last month. I forgot.
we have 511, right?
May 16th. Oh, yeah, May 11th and May 16th.
Okay, so 511 was last month. So wait. The same issue.
Yep.
Well, did anyone sit in and it's not noted up
Oh,
front?
yeah, the alternates were both absent.
Okay. Oops, that takes care of that. And 516? Okay. So we had BJ's. This is when they just came back.
BJ's.
Oh, this was where we weren't going to have a meeting, but then we,
Right, we had to bring.
okay. All right. Okay.
Somebody like to make a motion that we accept the minutes from May 16th, 2023, please?
We'll make the motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Noreen?
Last chance.
Penn.
Aye.
Pat Shea.
Aye.
Bonnie Franson.
Aye.
Jeff Manson.
Jane?
Lou Rivera.
Aye.
Okay, so what are we down to? Maybe 2 minutes now?
We have 2 plus.
Well, tonight's, but that'll be going forward, so that's great, because we'll be caught up. and
Most
we won't
caught
have
up
to
we've
look at
ever been.
5 at a time. I know, it's awesome.
All right, you need to come pick up these
Mondays and
plans.
Fridays, but now I'm going to be Wednesdays.
What are the plans?
They are the revised plans for
Oh, we have to
Homeland
adjourn.
Towers.
Adjourn.
Close my notebook. Hold on a second.
Does anyone else have any other business before we adjourn?
Yes, I have several. No, I'm kidding.
I'd like to go back to when I started on the board.
Jeff wants to be beat.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. No, I'm sorry.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you very much.